my son got one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Everyone has questions.
80%. So.
Good evening. I'd like to call today's MSAD 51 school board meeting to order. It is Monday, October 2nd, although I was just saying it's already felt like a week and it's only Monday. So welcome everyone here today. It's great to see some of our middle schoolers here. So I'm looking forward to our recognition section of the agenda. So going in order on the agenda, though, we're going to start with the recognition of Greeley PTO and Foundation 51. I am just thrilled to be recognizing two organizations who play such an integral role to the success of the students in our district and provide incredible support to our schools, teachers, and communities. We're going to start with the Greeley PTO, and I believe we have Gina Hayes and Jenny Burnell here to talk about the PTO. Oh, okay. Okay, yes. Do you mind coming up to the podium? I mean, I have a few words that I was going to continue to read, and but you can please. You're welcome to the podium. Okay, I'll continue talking while you go up. So thank you. Okay, great. Thank you. So many of you may be familiar with some of the incredible events that the PTO puts on, the upcoming grand event at MIW, Kindergarten Coffee, Poetry Jam, and the incredible staff appreciation days that they have hosts throughout the year. And so, yes, we just wanted to give a special recognition to all the work of the PTO, and we thank the members who are here today. So, yes, if you don't mind saying a few more words, I welcome that.
Is this on? Yeah?
Yes.
Oh, it is. Okay. Thank you so much for having us tonight and for recognizing our organization and the work that we do. We've got a lot of exciting things planned for this year, and we have a fantastic, energetic, really creative group of parents and teachers on our board. Like you said, we've got the grand event coming up October 18th, which is always a really fun event. And our biggest fundraiser, the Parent Power Appeal, is also coming up in a couple of weeks. We'll be launching that. Last year we raised $11,800. This year our goal is $15,000, and we know we can do it. Really excited. We increased our enrichment budget this year to $12 per student, and we'd like to increase that as well. So I'm really excited to opt for more field trips and enrichment programs and opportunities for the schools. Anything to add, Gina?
Yeah, I'll just add that one of our goals this year is to really try to get the word out more to the community that what the PTO does. We're trying to make note of it more on the field trip permission slips so that all the families know as well that the money that we raise goes back to the schools. It sends the kids on field trips. It's buying equipment for the playgrounds and stuff like that. So like Jenny said, $12 per student is the goal that we have for this year. We want it to be higher next year and the year after that. And we need everybody's support with that for all the fundraisers and everything. So we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So the second organization that we're recognizing tonight, again, such an incredible impact. I know I was at their fall fling on Friday night. That was quite a fun event in North Yarmouth. It's an independent funding that promotes student development and innovative teaching methods that inspire creativity and passion and encourage social responsibility. And we're really lucky to have Heather Godot here on behalf of Foundation 51. And yes, thank you. Heather's going up to the podium. I'm sure she has some exciting things to say, especially about the event on Friday.
Thank you so much for having us. It's our pleasure to partner with the PTO as well as you guys. We are a sister organization, so we do something a little bit different. We're most well known for awarding grants, and grants come from innovation, technology, and different facets to enrich the students in our district. Anyone can apply for a grant. It's actually grant season right now, so anyone can apply through October 15th. We do suggest or highly recommend that your grant be connected with a classroom in some way or some way of enhancing the students' learning. We also, lesser known, have two other arms. One is our innovative partnership. So those are things that you might see around campus that aren't necessarily through a grant, but through a one-time community organization like combination together, as well as partnering to remove barriers to accessing education. So this is where we work behind the scenes. We call ourselves like the ninjas. So you don't hear about this very often, but we work behind the scenes with social workers, and we work to help students who can access education in different ways. So not like through an IEP, but perhaps they don't have the financial means, or they're missing a basic part of what other students take for granted. So we work underneath to help them get what they need. You are welcome as a call to action. We just had our fall fling, which was fantastic. We don't have our numbers yet. We're pretty sure that we did raise over 5 figures, which is wonderful on Friday. So thank you for everyone who came out to participate and celebrate what we do. If you are interested in participating, you can keep a lookout for our online auction that will happen this winter, as well as anytime you can go to www.foundation51.org. There is a donate component there, and you automatically get your 501c3 charitable donation letter immediately back into your inbox. So thank you for considering us.
Thanks, Heather. All right, so we have one more recognition this evening, and I love looking out at all the little faces here to help celebrate our GMS 4-5 Green Team. And I may have heard you guys have a little presentation, and I'm going to welcome Carol up to talk about the Green Team.
Great. So I just have a few words to say. I'm really pleased to have some representatives from our green team here to speak with you tonight and share their work. Clubs at GMS 4-5 are just getting underway, so this group is highly motivated and already making a difference in our school. We've had a green team since around 2016, and I feel really lucky that we have staff members who have continued to carry that torch over the last 7 years to keep the green team fun, fresh, new, and something that our students who have environmental stewardship look forward to joining and taking part in. I'm going to welcome up Monica Moore, who is one of our 5th grade teachers and the club advisor. And then if all the students want to come up as well, they have a little bit to say. Yeah, come on. They have a little bit to say, too.
Thank you so much for having us, and I wanted to say that these ladies are wonderful and very brave, and they are a small representation in a very big way of our whole green team, which is approximately 40 students right now between grades 4 and 5. And they are very enthusiastic and can definitely make a difference. So you introduce yourself. Oh, they're going to tell us a little bit about why they joined the green team to start us off.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I did this last year and I love to come back because we do amazing activities that help the earth, and I wanted to be a part of it again this year.
Hi, my name is Mila, and I joined the green team because it's a great way to learn how to keep our environment clean.
Hi, my name is Lillian. I joined Green Team because I wanted to learn different ways to keep the earth clean and all the fun activities that we get to do.
Hi, my name is Audrey, and I joined Green Team because I'm excited for all the fun crafts we're going to do this year.
Hi, my name's Beezy. I joined Green Team to help keep the earth clean.
Hi, my name is Josette, and I joined the Green Team because last year I really liked helping our earth grow and making a difference, so I wanted to do that again this year.
Hi, my name is Mackenzie, and I joined Green Team because it's a good way to make friends and socializing skills, and it's also a really good way to keep the earth clean.
They're going to tell us a little bit about the activities planned this year.
In September, we made bountiful boxes that we are going to present today.
In October, we're going to make applesauce with local apples.
In November, we're going to take pine cones and cover them in peanut butter and then put bird seeds all around it and then feed the birds.
In December, we're going to make a gift from recyclable items.
In January, we're going to make an educational video.
In March, we're going to plant seedlings in recycled containers.
In May, we're going to maintain the gardens in the front of the school.
This is our September project.
Thank you for helping save the earth.
What is a bountiful box?
A bountiful box is a box that we put food in that we didn't eat, like this apple. Say someone didn't eat it, they would put it in the bountiful box, because if you threw it away, that would be a waste of food.
Why would we use a bountiful box?
Because if you Throw away food that you don't eat. It's a big waste.
Okay, cool. Cool.
Here are some examples of things that can go in the bin. Bananas can go in the bin. Apples can go in the bin. Oranges can go in the bin. I hope that instead of throwing these things out, you'll put them in the bin.
Take one.
This is something we would like you to put in the box.
Why you would put that in the box? Well, it's easy to, it's not open, and it can't be moldy because it's closed.
When you put the fruit into the box, make sure it is clean and not damaged. We want to make sure it's healthy for other people to eat. We also accept fruits like apples, oranges, and bananas, and pears and stuff like that. Got it? Ew.
Don't put that in the box.
This is something that you should not put in. See, it's open and it's empty almost. So that won't help anyway. Why should we use a bountiful box?
So uneaten food won't go to waste.
Cool.
How do you spell recycle?
Nobody ever throw any paper in the trash. Don't forget to use the bountiful box. The green team's keeping the earth clean.
They're just going to tell you a few words about the box they created, and while they were creating the box, we got some video clips and put all that together to educate the rest of the students.
The bountiful boxes are used for things that people don't eat, like goldfish or apples or bananas, so they don't go to a waste.
We want to make sure that we put food in this bountiful box so that if kids don't have food, that they can always get a snack so that they're not hungry.
The bountiful boxes are for so we don't waste and so other kids can have food to help them not be hungry through the school day.
Like if you need food and you forgot your lunch, then you can grab like goldfish or an apple from the box.
The bountiful boxes are a great way to keep people from throwing out things that don't need to be wasted. Also, when a kid puts a yogurt in, the teachers put it in the fridge.
The bountiful box can be really helpful because we're not wasting money that the school uses to buy the kids food.
Thank you for having us.
Can I put my apple in your box? I just happen to have an apple that could hopefully, if somebody wants to eat this, there you go. Thank you so much for coming here today and your commitment to keeping our earth green. And this gives me so much hope. Can we start every board meeting with a presentation like this? Thank you, truly. And I hope you bring this message back to those who couldn't join you tonight. And we so appreciate everything that you are doing as students and the support that the teachers and staff give to make sure this programming continues to happen. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And I hope to see you guys again soon. So thank you. Good luck. Great. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think we're going to move to approval of minutes. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of September 18, 2023 as presented.
A second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Megan. Any questions or comments? I know Annika had submitted a few corrections, but I think have been made to the notes that are in your folder. All right, all in favor of approval? Great. Unanimous. All right, so now we're moving on to public comment. So the board welcomes and recognizes the value of public comment, and to ensure public comment is fair and orderly, we follow the procedures outlined in our board policy BEDH, and we ask that all members of the public do so as well. We follow this policy to help keep the meeting civil, respectful, and productive. We also hope that this allows for all community members who would like to speak to be heard. We ask that speakers use the designated podium when making their comments and speak into the microphone. If you're interested in speaking, please wait until you're recognized by myself, the chair. Comments by individuals are limited to a maximum of 3 minutes at a meeting. A clock will be visible on the screen to help keep track of the time, and after 3 minutes, the timer will go off and comments should be wrapped up. Please state your name and town of residence before beginning your remarks. Residents and staff members will be given priority over non-residents within the allotted time. Our policy allows for 30 total minutes of public comment, although it can be modified at the discretion of the board. As a reminder, public comment is not a time for discussion, Q&A, or debate among the board and speakers. Rather, is a chance for members of the public to express their opinions on school and educational matters. The board will not comment on remarks made by speakers during the public comment period. Please know that this does not mean we are not listening, and it does not express any agreement or disagreement with your statements. Lastly, please keep comments respectful and civil. We are neighbors here. I hope we can all be kind. That includes members of the audience. Please do not interrupt or respond to a speaker's comments. We also ask that comments are addressed to the chair, so please do not direct comments at or about individuals in our schools or community. I do want to note that I will stop any comment that is contrary to these rules, and that individuals who disrupt the meeting may be asked to leave. Okay, so I'd like to welcome, I know we have some members of the audience still here, and if anyone would like to be welcome to the podium. Great, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jen Janako. I live in North Yarmouth. I have 2 students in MSAD 51, one at GHS and one at GMS. I wanted to share with you tonight that recently I read a book called Trans in College. It profiled a number of trans students and what it is like to live in a space that is not designed to be welcoming. One concept that the author highlights is the idea of, quote, coming into community so that you can, quote, come out to your community. So that got me thinking a little bit about how we welcome students and how we want people to come into our community and feel comfortable being who they are. One of the students that was interviewed in this study said, quote, "The internet is my hometown," because this person's hometown was not a welcoming space for him. I felt like this is one of the saddest comments in the book because it made me wonder, do we have people in our community who feel this way? And so I just wanted to bring this up because I want to highlight that I think that the work that we do, I'm looking to, that the work that we do here should be in the effort to help all of our members come into community. So wherever you are, whoever you are, I think we should value those members. And as I was looking at the agenda tonight, I think this also fits really well with our strategic goal of wellness. And so when we want to be well-rounded students and staff, we need to be able to understand different viewpoints, we need to be exposed to different viewpoints, and we need to be feeling welcome in sharing who we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thanks.
My name is Jill O'Connor, and I'm a Cumberland resident and the parent of a middle schooler. I'm just here in support of teachers and librarians and their right to teach the books that they feel will push our students, helping them to grow and question and to purchase and add books to library collections that reflect the widest number of viewpoints and perspectives. So the fact that I'm here on the second day of Ban Books Week, which is happening nationally, talking to you about the fact that there are adults in our district who call for the banning of books from libraries in our schools feels like something out of a dystopian novel. For me, the history of book banning brings to mind pretty horrible images of book burnings in Germany during the 1930s. The types of books they wanted removed were often things that were political and dealt with gender and identity. So the books, of course, were fictionalized a couple decades later. The book burnings, were fictionalized a couple decades later in the novel Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. And it seems amazing that we're back in something like a novel like that. And it feels like maybe fictionalizing it made us think it wasn't still happening. But of course, as most of you have read and know, it is happening. And they're using the same tactics. They're using fear-mongering. Did you know your child is reading this book? They're using words like pornography to go along with that fear-mongering. They are using just certain scenes that deal with sexual abuse or sexual exploration instead of looking at the entire story and the very important voice of the person who is telling the story, and therefore disregarding the worthiness of the rest of that book. The other thing they're doing is conflating curricular texts often with library books. It's one thing to say, I don't want my child to read that book. It's another to say, I don't want any student to be able to have access to this book. A book that could answer questions, affirm identity, and save lives. A library is a place of voluntary inquiry. No one is forcing people to check out books in a library. I know this because I work in one, and we never, ever, ever make somebody check a book out. They're usually there of their own free will, looking for a story that's either a window or a mirror, right? Sometimes you need a book that tells a story that someone that looks like you, and sometimes you need a story that gives you a window into someone else's life. This only grows empathy. So, it's also putting some of these parents at odds with our teaching profession, these people we trust, these people we've credentialed, these people we let work with our kids. And so they also often say that we need safe spaces for kids, but safe spaces does not always mean comfortable spaces, and that learning involves growth, and growth involves stretching and changing, and it's not always comfortable. So it's productive and it's necessary, and thank you so much for letting us come up here, and these stories are so important. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to say, the bell does go off, and it is a little alarming. So now you know. Would anyone else like to come for public comment?
Hi, everyone. My name is Shauna Mueller. I'm a parent in the district, and I'm also a recent new community member representative on the diversity committee. And I just wanted to say I was here a couple of months ago for the principals' presentations to kick off this new school year, and also attended the middle school 6 through 8 parent night recently. And I just really appreciated how the principals and the teachers are emphasizing building a classroom community right from the start of the school year. It ties into all of the community's goals and strategic initiatives that this board is talking about too, and really allows for students to feel like they are in a place where they are trusted, and that when there's conflict that arises, they can sort that out for themselves and with their trusted teachers. And it's all just really an important part of why I feel comfortable with my kids in the classroom. Also, just a shout out to the Mountains 6th grade team, because I'm sitting there thinking this must be fun to be in these classrooms all day with these people. So I just thought I'd offer that. So thanks so much.
Anyone else? Okay, I think we're going to close public comment. Thank you. So, now we get to move to presentations. I'm really excited to hear about the summer facility project update from Scott.
All right, let's see if I can bring this up on the screen. Here we go, magic of technology. Yeah, so the presentation this evening will be on the summer projects that we accomplished this summer in about 7-week time frame. Also, while this isn't inclusive of all of the projects that we did, there were a lot of minor ones. This will give us, you know, kind of an outline of what were the major things that happened this summer in terms of what we had budgeted capital funds for. So one of the first projects that I wanted to share with you is in Mabel I. Wilson School. While we also had the school revolving renovation funds that we received to do ventilation work upgrades, we also expanded the cafeteria due to space, removed the stage, expanded the cafeteria, and you'll see the 2 windows in the first picture that are now at the end of the cafeteria. To provide light into the cafeteria, we repainted the entire cafeteria, new floor tile, and there are some, while not visible in this picture, there's some new cafeteria tables in place. So significantly brightened it up, and also the ventilation and also air conditioning will be in that facility as soon as we get the unit on the rooftop from the revolving renovation funds. Another area of Mabel I. Wilson School that was in need of repair was the parent entrance, and that area had quite a lot of the pavement was broken up and presented a trip hazard. Also, the drainage going down towards the building was not draining right, and so we would get ice and other things built up in that area. So that was leveled, the drainage improved, and new paving put down in that parent entrance area. We also had one of our most major projects was the moving of the 10-room portable cluster, and also adding a 12-room portable cluster to the complex. And you'll see the number of pictures here. The stairs and the ramps were all made with roofs on them and partially enclosed so that they would shed weather from students entering and exiting the buildings. A lot of grade work was done here around the site to improve some of the drainage, and a lot of the paving put in place to also help us clear that area during the winter of snow and ice. Continues with pictures. There's a basically an 8-inch high, 6 to 8 inch high gate all the way around the facility now, along with you know, security systems on the structures in the building. You can see the ramp in one of the pictures, and you can see the fence lines and some of the area of how these were laid out across this area. One of the problems that we had was the grading of the site. There was about a 5-foot difference from one end all the way to the other, and what we found when we were moving the 10-room cluster out of the way, there was upwards of 12 blocks holding the modular up. So we had to significantly build this site up in order to make sure that we didn't have that number of blocks underneath the 12-room cluster, which would have made it unsafe. So we made sure that we made it as safe as possible. Some of the other areas that we worked on was we installed a brand new playground. Thank you to our facilities crew who have been working tirelessly on that. In fact, this weekend they put in about 20 hours. There's 2 panels left to install, and this coming weekend there'll be the rest of the wood chips put down and the fencing taken down, and that playground will be open for the start of school on Monday. Okay, the following week, just to give everybody an update on that. You'll see there's also the ship over in the second picture from the top. I don't have them from the Titanic on there like you did there, Jeff, so our facility staff, but we had a couple of our facility staff that were up on the last picture. But This is for our pre-K area, and so the pre-K students can now come directly out of the building and walk out onto a play facility area. There's also the covered structure, very similar to the middle school's covered structure down in the lower right hand. And that now has picnic tables underneath it, and it's a wooded chipped area, so it provides shade and also protection from the weather. At this point, out in that area, it can be used for small group spaces and play and other things. You'll also see way over to the right, you can see a lot of the other work that we had to do in shaping that area of the site. And I would say on this, while I'm going to have a lot at the end of this presentation, Story Brothers was a huge help in getting this accomplished in that 7-week time frame. So more pictures of the outside shaded structure. The playground, obviously, as we went around looking at that, and also you can see some of the grading improvements in the far right-hand side and how that lays out on the site. We have the pergolas, which are in the entry areas at the bus loop, around the kitchen area, and some of the other areas around the parent entrances. All of those pergolas were pretty rusted and pretty bad shape, so we had all of those, the rust removed. We had them properly primed and repainted in order to preserve them for the future. One of the other projects that took place, and Doughton's Construction has been extremely helpful in this, along with the cafeteria area at Mabel I. Wilson School. They were also extremely helpful in recreating the office up to the high school. As you know, we had security issues up there where you couldn't see the main entrance and up the hallway of the other area of the other entrance. And what we've done is taken the secretaries from their position that was back further, more towards the windows, towards the back, and moved them up further in a behind a counter, which allows them to see more of the facility and more of the open area for people coming in and out of the building. Again, all new tile, all new painting, and of course, the Greeley maroon in the background on the wall, along with the maroon countertops and maroon tile and white floor. It also, we moved one of the doors further up so that and also the main entrance area coming in, there's actually a hand-in window where people can hand stuff in through the window rather than having to enter in through the building. So it was a major security upgrade to that area. And also there's a doorway in the first picture you can see there. That was to separate the confidentiality of the administrative space from the open space out front, so that that area was more conducive to confidential conversations. We did a lot of paint work up at the high school, and again, Doughton's Construction, we thank them for their work on this. You can see that the maroon stripe in the hallway, also along with the white striping in the hallway, pretty much throughout the major hallways of the building, there was a lot of paint work that was done through the high school, which really freshened up the building a lot. One of my favorites, the snack shack. So when we had to turn the section of the field house into a weight room, we took a section of the booster area and also the old snack shack. We found we needed bathroom space out by the field area because the porta potty was not working all the time. They weren't getting picked up on time and they were being vandalized. So we added 3 bathrooms at the end of the field house. And this is to replace the snack shack area that used to be available. And it's a wonderful building. I mean, it's if you look at the outside of it, you can also see we put a heat pump in it for heat and AC in the structure. You'll look on the top of the roof in the center piece, and you'll see there's an exhaust there now for being able to cook inside. And if I continue on, well, first off, I'll point out the serving window, which faces the track. And there's also open windows on the other side you can see which face the field area. And as we look at the inside of the building, You can see that the floor is a tile-coated floor with traction to it. There's also plenty of countertop space. Second photo from the right shows that there's a grill installed now. So there's an actual griddle inside the building with an exhaust hood up above it. And you can see that there's cooler space, a sink, and this whole facility now is heated and AC'd and is basically a year-round building at this point that can be used by our boosters and our community. So one of the last projects is that we did an entire phone replacement system in the district to voice over internet. And that was a huge upgrade, and I'd like to thank technology for their work around that. Dirk Van Kuren was integral in the bidding of this project, and a group that consisted of working with Connectivity Point. This is what the phones look like now. Quite an upgrade, and we really had some security issues around the campus where certain phone systems weren't working properly. Phone systems would go down, and we wouldn't have people be able to call in and out. So the voice over internet, if there is a problem and internet goes down or power goes down, it'll swap over to the copper lines so that we'll still have phone service in the buildings. In addition to that, we took a lightning strike at the middle school, which wiped out the intercom system. So we've had to put in a new intercom system, and that should be pretty much up and going shortly, I believe. But we had a lot of intercom areas. We did a short-term fix. Right now, we're trying to get that taken care of through insurance. I'm not sure how much of that, because it's about a 20-year-old system. So I'm not sure how much of that will be depreciated, but we'll do our best to get what we can from that. So that was one of the other upgrades. And the only thing I'd like to end with is just a special thanks, not just to the vendors that are listed here, but our facilities staff, our technology staff, and then truly the building administrators, Corey and Mallory and their help at that building. Also Carl Francis at the high school for his work. But Doughton's Construction, amazing to work with. We work with them a lot of summers, and I'm simply amazed at how much they can help us get done in a 7-week period, and they're used to working in schools. They do a lot of work for Falmouth and up in Wyndham as well. Story Brothers had really pulled it off for us as we found out that grading problem that we had on the campus, and just getting all that done, including helping us get the playground in space. Schiavi Modular Leasing, they built those modulars, delivered them all the way from way out of state, way down south, and brought those all north, and right down to the wire. We were waiting for the heat, AC, and ventilation units for those. Each one has its own unit, and we were right up against the start of school, and they pulled it off and got it done for us. Right up against the start of school, and they pulled it off and got it done for us. Connectivity Point on the phone system and the intercom system, they were great to work with. And then Guggen's Electric was also amazing. They're a vendor here in town. We found that as we were adding the second 12-room cluster, or the 12-room cluster to Mabel I. Wilson School, we found out that we didn't have enough power to come out of Mabel I. Wilson School, so we had to put in another transformer, run lines, work with CMP, and also work with Guggen's Electric, and they were very helpful to pull that off. So thank you to all our vendors who helped us get that done in about a 7-week period. So that's the update that I have.
Great. Thanks, Scott. And thanks for your oversight of all of this work. And I know it's how important it is for all of these relationships that you have to be able to get the work done in 7 weeks. It's really incredible. And I was glad we could kick off this year with a recognition of Don Foster and facilities. And yeah, it's incredible what went on over the summer. Any questions about any of the updates for the summer projects?
Scott, you missed that little detail about the windows that overlook the field in the snack shack. You want to explain those?
The 2 windows?
It was a nice touch.
Yes, we, let's go
Find
back
that picture
real quick, okay? So the 2 windows on the right-hand side of this building over here, the far right-hand picture, you'll see that prior, you really couldn't look out onto the field if you were in the snack shack working. So what we did is we made sure that we added 2 windows and increased the height of the fence so that those who are working in the snack shack and trying to raise money could also see the game on the field.
So having worked in the snack shack, and for those who have, thank you very much for thinking of that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it is amazing because, you know, like I said, all this work has to happen in a relatively short period of time. You know, we don't look for the target to be September 1, right? We're looking for the target to be 2 weeks before that because we have staff needing to get into the facilities, classrooms that have to be set up. So we're really, our target isn't right before the start of school. Our target has to be basically 2 weeks before that, so.
Any other questions?
No, I'd just like to point out that for the last several summers, like 6 or 7 summers, there's been a huge amount of work that's been done on the campus for enrollment, mostly for enrollment purposes, and just maintaining and keeping our facilities in good shape. And I want to give Scott and Dawn another shout out because Scott, you're kind of the mastermind behind all of it, and get it all done in a short period of time. And I always kind of marvel at, and Dawn is the kind of on the ground, making sure it does happen from day to day. The two of them together get this done, and so thank you, Scott, for all of your work.
Thank you.
This is a huge amount of work that gets done in a very short period of time.
Big charts on the walls.
Yeah.
Yes, Tom?
So, yeah, I just want to echo that this is a really impressive, productive summer from a facility standpoint, and some really much needed work that's been, you know, coming for a while now. Also, I've heard rave reviews about the Snack Shack. I think it's a really nice addition. And then the question I have is, so we've added a lot of classroom capacity through the modulars at Mabel I. Wilson. Are you able to say how things are with the more common spaces? Like, how's capacity for like the gym and the cafeteria's been expanded, but we also have, you know, 800 students in a 550 student building. Yep. How sustainable is this?
It's not sustainable. What we've done is created classroom space. The largest problem that we have right now is common space. Your libraries, your cafeteria, your gymnasium, pull-out spaces for students, and just general space. So the common spaces are a problem, and it's not sustainable as we continue to go. This is just a temporary fix.
And in the short term, it's just a matter of like scheduling, getting kids at lunch at different times, or in the gym at you know, or do we have to cut back on gym schedules or things like that?
So many of our gym classes share the gym at the same time. So we have 2 PE teachers at least half of the week that are working out of that same room. So we have it's a small gym to begin with, and then we've got a curtain or a divider, so we have 2 classes. Some of the classes also team teach, so we'll have 40 students in the gym at the same time with 2 teachers. Depends on the scheduling of that space, but it is quite crowded, and for a small gym, to have that many students with PE. The assemblies at that school cannot be done as a whole school, so that was discontinued, I don't know, 2 or 3, 4 years ago, and now we have half the school comes in at a time, and then the other half right after that.
Well, and if you look at it, we've added 22 classrooms on top of all of the space renovations that we've done over there over the course of the past, 8 years, Jeff, probably 8 to 10 years, trying to make new space and carving out every space we can. The cafeteria, while we expanded it, still isn't enough to basically reduce the number of lunches that we do for example. It just creates more space to address the enrollment that we have.
Yeah, at some point, I don't want to say this too loudly, but at some point we'll probably end up doing what we do at the middle school. We run 4 lunches at Mabel Wilson right now. We run 5 lunches at the middle school, which means we're starting lunch, around 10:45-ish. It's off a few minutes every year, depending on the schedule, but and they keep going until after 1 o'clock. So it's a little early for some of the kids. to be eating. And Mabel Wilson, at some point it's going to be at 5 lunches. We're at capacity. So with the expansion of the cafeteria certainly helped. It was just it just felt like being in a room with sardine, just kind of cooked up like this when you're in there. But it's a little bit more breathable being in there, but it's still very, very challenging.
Thanks. The last thing I want to mention is when I told my daughter I was coming here tonight, she said, "Are you going to talk about the playground?" So I'm glad I can report back. Yes, we've talked about the playground, and it looks awesome.
You'll find, like I said, it was 20 hours worth of work this past weekend, and fortunately, Don and his family are on a well-deserved vacation starting this week, and the next upcoming weekend they'll have things wrapped up, and so people will be able to enjoy the rest of the playground.
Probably also been fun rolling out a bit at a time too. For
Yeah,
the
it's been
kids,
kind of
right?
a surprise every time something comes out.
Well, the language also didn't come in English, so all the directions had to be translated as they were going forward. So came over in a cargo ship with a different language. So
Missing parts, broken parts. It was fun.
Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you. So we have one item for action this evening. It's the annual approval of the district emergency plan. Can I get a motion, please?
I'll move to approve the MSAD 51 emergency plan as presented.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Great, thanks. Jeff, would you like to give a little
Sure.
summary?
So I'll just, actually, this is a summary that can be found on our website. Maine School Administrative District 51. Comprehensive emergency operation plan has been established to provide for the safety, health, and security of our students and staff. This plan addresses mitigation, prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery with respect to a variety of emergencies that may occur within the school unit and within the schools. This plan incorporates the ALICE safety approach as its primary prevention strategy. This plan was developed under the direction of the superintendent and a district-wide safety and security committee headed by Chair Don Gray, who's an administrator here at the high school, includes 2 board members, several school and district administrators, teachers association representative, social worker, school nurse, the police chief, and police captain of Cumberland, both fire chiefs, both school resource officers, and a representative from the district attorney's office. This plan acts as the umbrella for all school-based emergency operation plans. Additionally, the district maintains a relationship with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security School Protective Division, along with our local first responding agencies. In the event of an emergency or a violent incident, the initial response to an individual school building is the responsibility of the school building emergency response team. Upon activation of this team, the superintendent or designee and appropriate local emergency response officials will be notified. Depending on the nature of the emergency, county and state officials will also be notified. The district refuses to tolerate violence or threats of violence on school grounds, and by implementation of this plan, will make every effort to both prevent and thwart violent incidents from occurring. MSAD 51 will provide the appropriate authority and budgetary resources in support of this effort. Violence prevention is the responsibility of the entire school community, and participation by all individuals is encouraged. The plan requires the prompt reporting of all violent incidents or threats and assures that victims or reporters of violence will not be discriminated against. In accordance with state law, all district and school emergency operation plans are confidential and are not subject to disclosure in order to reduce the potential for plan sabotage. So we do have 22 plans that are out right now. These plans were completely overhauled and revamped over the last 18 months by the safety committee. And then the 22 binders that are out go to our first responders, our administrators. The board of directors has the opportunity to look at that, and I know a couple of board members came in to review that, and I know others have done in the past. But just to let you know, this is a new emergency operations plan, and it is lined up with Homeland Security's practices on good practice. So we replaced our plan that we have. We take it very seriously. The safety and security committee met every month last year to develop this plan, along with implementing Alice, and continues to meet. This is a regular committee that meets on a regular basis with our first responders. So I want to thank the Cumberland Police Department, Cumberland Fire Department. They've been at every single meeting. North Yarmouth Fire Department, every single meeting. Our SROs and our entire team for working on this and taking this incredibly seriously for the protection of all of our students and staff and visitors here. And we also are rolling out a new effort in January called the Sandy Hook Promise, which is essentially an anonymous tip reporting line that Sandy Hook Promise actually operates for us, and then it connects us in the administration and first responders to an imminent threat, and then for threats that are not imminent are provided to the administration at any hour of the day. So that is something they work with thousands of schools in the United States. We got on their list and we were approved. It is free to our district through the Sandy Hook Promise, and we're excited that we'll be rolling that out to our community, school community, in January. So,
Any questions or comments? Great.
Jeff, what sort of, I don't know, obviously you can't tell us what the plan is, but given the number of portables, that was a big concern of a lot of parents with the incident last fall. I think it was last fall. So did there have to be amendments? Was there someone that you could talk to about what to do when you have portables on a campus to keep everybody safe? I'm just curious how that
So that's
works out.
a conversation we constantly have with our first responders, the police department, the fire department, in both communities have helped us a lot with that. Our SROs, one of our SROs has an office in a modular. So just to let you know that we have 2 SROs now in the district, and one of them is now situated in one of the modulars as the office for that officer. So that is a primary concern with the safety. Scott worked a lot with the safety apparatus to make sure we had everything in place. That's why we replaced all the fencing for extra security around the playground. That's always been a concern of mine. Even before we had the modulars, that was something that we had talked a lot about. And so we got a lot of advice on that. The Safety and Security Committee was very much involved in making sure that we've got plans for that. But I think having our, one of our SROs stationed there as their office for between the Wilson School and the middle school has helped a lot, and just kind of giving the eyeball look at a lot of things. Okay. And then Homeland Security did a full audit of all of our facilities back in 2000, I think it was 19 now. But in that part of that report, we continued to implement those recommendations, and one of them was around modulars. We had started having modulars on site at that point. So we have made lots of upgrades to our security on the modulars, the old ones we had, and then the new ones we've had, and adding a lot of features.
Anne?
I did have a chance to go into the central office and take a look at the safety plan. And I appreciate the amount of work that went into it. There are a lot of thorough details in terms of responding to different types of events that would cause us to be the best prepared that we can be. I mean, obviously, in a crisis situation, there's always things that we're not going to be able to do because of the nature of a crisis. You can't predict everything. But I was wondering, there seemed to be maybe some information that still needs to be added into the documents, and when that can be anticipated to be added. I made some notes that I'm happy to share with you.
Yeah, and that'll be helpful, because that was one thing I wanted to mention. What you're approving tonight is not the end version. Mm-hmm. The committee will continue working on this plan all year. That's been the plan from the beginning. We wanted to draft, approved by the board, all those situational, we have about 20 of those in the plan for different things that could come up. Those are going to be subgrouped by the committee and continue to review them with our first responders to make sure that they are most current. We also have some things, I don't know when you came in, but we've already added.
I was there this afternoon.
Several things, okay. We've already added several things to the plan. And I think the one you looked at, if I remember which, we have a binder that we held, does not include those new things yet. And those are things that we've been working on, and we just added those in. But we'll continue doing that. And that plan has to be, by the plan itself, written right into the plan. It must be reviewed by the committee annually, at least.
Yep.
This year it will be, continuous, before it ever goes to the board for approval. So that's our protocol. And then by the first responders, obviously, in helping us with those details every year, we have to adjust it.
Thank you.
Can I ask one last question? Does it also include sporting events, theatrical presentations, safety outside of the classroom?
It does. I think that's an area we want to dig into a little bit more, and the safety committee did talk about that. So the athletic director obviously has one of our safety binders, and we are reviewing all those safety procedures with each administrator as well. But yes, that is absolutely part of our plan.
Other questions? Okay. I'd call for a vote. All in favor of approval? Great. Unanimous. Okay, that was our only item for action, and now we get to move into our workshop, and I was waiting to open my seltzer. Okay, so we're really excited to have Tyler Barter here with us from Oak Point. I think probably his work on helping address our enrollment growth has certainly predated my term on the board, and probably most others. We have been working since late, I think 2018. I've been following along. We have this really great website about the new school project with the whole history, and some of the interesting time points is 2015 is when MIW exceeded its 550 students. And in 2018, we got some updated projections that continued to project the increase in enrollment that we've seen over the past 5+ years. And so we have continued to recommit through 5 or 6 board terms every year. Other boards and other committees have been working to put forward a solution to address the enrollment growth, and tonight is another step in that process. Obviously, with the failed referendum in November, we wanted to look at a lot of different options and opportunities, looked at other sites, what was available, what could we do, and as you heard maybe through our last meeting of the prior board in June and the first meeting with this full board, that we went back through all the information and recommitted to 80 Gray Road as the site for the new school. And now we're really looking at, okay, what can we do different? What opportunities do we have that could both address the enrollment growth, but address some of the cost concerns? And so what we're going to be seeing in tonight's presentation is an estimate, an updated cost estimates and designs. Unfortunately, since time has passed, some of these costs have gotten larger. So even just looking at the same thing that was put forward last time, re-estimating that, unfortunately, I don't know what the percentage is, I'm sure Tyler and others know exactly what percentage the growth has been since our estimates last year, but to just do the same work, the construction costs. And so really trying to take a hard look at what other opportunities we have and who can look at the cost, what are all the different ways that we could look to put this project forward for something for our community to address these issues. And so I'm excited to see Tyler's presentation. I know we've worked over the past few weeks to look through, okay, what are the options for areas that we can reduce. And so I am happy that the board gets to also then give this a hard look as we don't have a vote on anything tonight. This is informational. This is a workshop. This is where we dig into the details. And then after tonight, we are going to continue to work with both of our towns to better understand what the potential tax impact, if we were going to move forward with what's being presented this evening. And our next meeting is actually a joint meeting with both the towns when we're hoping to have updated growth numbers, have some more time with the towns to look at the cost estimates and what the projections are for the tax impact on individuals. And so we just, this is really the first next step, I guess, in looking at what the options are for 80 Gray Road. So Tyler, thank you. I don't know if there's anything else.
I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got two screens going.
Two screens going at
Yeah.
once.
So thanks for the introduction. It's great to be back here to continue talking about this project. As you had mentioned, we came on board in the fall of 2019. So it's been a solid 4 years, starting our 5th year of work on this project. There's been a lot of effort invested by a number of boards and community members throughout this process to get to where we are right now. So what we did over the past month or so is we've taken really a kind of a comprehensive look at the total project, and we've really dove into all of the different cost elements, where the money is spent. We took a look at some of the program elements. We went back and revisited some of the design elements, kind of a fresh set of eyes. It's been just about a year now since the last referendum and the work that was done previously. And we wanted to make sure we were kind of testing a lot of those assumptions, those design decisions that had been made. Through that process, we have a number of things that we'll talk about in a little bit that we've brought forward as options. They have implications across the board, whether it be on a little bit on capacity. We tried to minimize impact on student-centered learning. There's a little bit of impact on the sustainability side, energy efficiency. So we have some balancing to do as we begin to talk about all of these costs and where this project goes from here. So a quick overview, just as a reminder of where we were in the fall of 2022. Overall, the plan really hasn't changed what we're bringing forward for the final solution. So we know that there's a challenge at MIW. That challenge is going to be coming down the road very shortly at the middle school. And that really was some of the driving forces behind this final recommendation on grade level reconfiguration in your buildings, was to try to address those two core areas where you're experiencing that population growth and limited resources, and try to address it with one project that kind of checks the box for a number of different buildings. So moving 2 grades out of the middle school allows us to do some population control there for the future, setting you up long term, with the biggest changes coming at Mableye. So Mableye currently being the K3, moving 3 grades out to 80 Gray Road in the new facility, really gives us an opportunity to address the capacity at Mableye and the middle school, while still giving you a fantastic long-term flexibility at a new building on the new site. Overall, what we were looking at capacity-wise, we had essentially between 11 and 10 classrooms, depending on the individual grade levels, and that gave us a total building capacity of 736. Long-term flexibility was always one of the goals in there, is making sure that you didn't move in and all of a sudden, be right back where you started. So we've continued to work in flex classrooms, spaces that are set up as collaborative work areas, pull-out spaces that can be converted with no construction effort in the future to grade level classrooms. So as you have a bubble that comes through, we've got some capacity built in there. That's what those 3 flex classrooms are. So overall, this sets the district up for a long term. The enrollment projections that we've had to date, this building will address those going out for the next 10 plus years with additional capacity long term. So at the time, the last referendum was broken down into 2 columns. So we had the new primary school and then additional work at Mabel I. Wilson. At the time, the primary school was estimated to be 71.5 with an additional 2.4 over at Mabel I. One of the things that you're going to see different tonight is the removal of Mabel I from the project budget recommendations. And some of this goes to a lot of the work that Scott talked about tonight. A lot of work has been done on playground infrastructure, changes to the cafeteria. We've been able to address a lot of the ventilation and HVAC concerns in some spaces with programs through the State Revolving Renovation Fund. And with a recent expansion of that program, there's an opportunity to continue to harness state money to address some of those smaller programs, changes that are required in this building, such as finishing up the remaining amounts of windows, accessibility challenges in bathrooms. So we're really trying to tap into as many other funding sources as we can as those become available and they're identified. So if you remember the revolving fund, $1 million worth of windows, they reimburse you for about $540,000. So it's a fantastic program. The rest is loan free or interest free. So we continue to look at those opportunities. So you won't see any talk about Mabel I tonight in the costs going forward. So for a budget update, I think everyone's felt it recently between the supermarket, the gas pump. If you've gone to Home Depot for construction materials, things haven't gotten cheaper since November of 2022. And I think that was really expected. Construction industry-wise, we have seen the start of a leveling off, which is fantastic. We're really kind of crossing our fingers that things have kind of flattened, that we're getting back to that 3 to 4% increase after a series of years where it was anywhere from 7 to 9 to 10%, depending on which specific trade that we were talking about. So as I mentioned, as we looked at all of these different costs, our civil engineer reached out to all of our sub-consultants. We started to ping our resources in the construction industry. We were checking all of our material costs, and that goes across the board. And we did notice some pretty significant upticks. It was alluded to before. So as we get into this, we're going to break this down into the total building project. So this is the one-for-one comparison, November 2022 to now. So this is straight construction escalation resulting from that 18-month difference in the start of construction. And that's really where we're starting to kind of use as our baseline for these budget numbers. So where that brings us is to just over $83 million. It's a pretty significant uptick from that 71.5. It works out to somewhere between 15 and 16% escalation over 18 months to 24 months, depending on when this actually hits the ground. So understanding, the cost is obviously a very significant piece for the community. It's going to be something that's going to be, probably the most sought after information. It's going to be a lot of discussion points. So as we took a look at some of the things that were mentioned before, what were some of those different program elements, changes to the building that we could take a look at to overall reduce that cost, give the district a fantastic long-term solution, still meet a lot of those sustainability goals, but maybe ease up on some of them, all along trying not to, as I mentioned before, impact the student-centered learning. So making sure that we're providing the program spaces and all of those different components to make this a really successful educational facility. So our primary effort was around taking a look at circulation, secondary spaces, reconfiguring some of the wings, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we move through. We knew capacity wasn't something that we were going to be, really interested in recommending a reduction on. That long-term flexibility is really important. There's not a lot of extra space in the core pieces, so removing classrooms really wasn't an option. And then also taking a look at what scope elements could potentially be funded through other sources. So grant writing, partnerships with other community agencies, potential, government allowances through Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot of other programs out there. And then also looking at what other parts of this, may be able to be pulled in through some of those funding sources down the road. So doing some good long-term planning as we look at the bid documents after this moves to the next phase. So Sarah and I spent, I don't know, the better part of a few days really just diving into the overall building floor plan. We've had a number of conversations with the district, and we identified a few things that kind of set off a little bit of a domino effect. One was eliminating one pre-K flex classroom from the wing in the upper right-hand corner. And what that did was it allowed us to kind of start pulling some of those allied arts in the bright green area that you see highlighted on the top left into the building a little bit more, which addressed a couple different concerns for us. One was safety and security, having classrooms directly at the front next to the parent drop-off, kind of pulling those grade level classrooms into the core of the building. So a lot of those things started to give us some opportunities to take a look at the shape of the building and give us a little bit of some efficiencies. The other piece that we looked at, we had turned if you see in the bottom right-hand corner, we had turned one of the classroom wings. It created a little bit of interest in some different program spaces inside. But we took a look at how, after moving some of the other classrooms around, was there a way to kind of ease up on some of that circulation that was being used for both student learning and circulation, and see if we could make some good reductions there. Between those two efforts, we trimmed out about 3,500 square feet from the building. So you've probably heard me say this at other meetings before, is that the most meaningful reductions that we can make are in square footage. So that was overall, a pretty significant reduction. As we took a look of what that would do to the overall building capacity, by converting pre-K rooms into flex rooms, it gave us a little bit more long-term capacity there. So the result is removal of one classroom that was dedicated capacity-wise in the calculations as pre-K, turning the others to flex. It actually only resulted in a net deficit of 6 students in your building capacity. So overall, still that great long-term capacity in the building by giving you an extra 100 students plus or minus in the different grade levels. So still maintaining that long-term flexibility. Some of the other areas that we heard in some of the public comments and we took a little bit of a deeper dive into were some of the outdoor play and learning areas that could be constructed, especially since they occurred directly at the end of the project. They're kind of the last things that we do as we're backing out of the site. And they're great opportunities for grant writing and other community efforts to construct. Allison's not here, so she'll, be the first one to say that they're often the value management department. So a lot of times they get cut. But this is a great opportunity to kind of ease back on a couple of those things that could be funded later, either through other sources or if funds are available through contingency at the end of the project. The other piece that we've identified, and a lot of these came out of some pretty aggressive sustainability goals that the previous board had set for us. We had really increased a lot of insulation both in the roof and walls, and we had pushed toward triple pane windows. These aren't something that we're super excited to give back, because these are all elements that pay for themselves rather. But this is something that, if needed, could be bid alternates if we get some great favorable bids. One thing we would need to talk to you about is right-sizing building systems so that we're not overbuilding those. If we are able to pick up some of those additional building envelope upgrades. And the other component that came out was identifying the geothermal system. It's a pretty significant expense, a lot of wells, and there are still some great technologies out there that would give us some great building efficiency, system efficiencies. So that was something that we wanted to talk about. This is one area, and then also the addition of photovoltaics that we've been doing a lot of research. There's a direct grant from the federal government to school districts through the Inflation Reduction Act that would likely fund almost the entirety of this upgrade, with some challenges of the, how you get it pre-funded up to the point where the rebate comes in. So there's some discussions to be had here. It's a system that would pay for itself long-term in a general sense, 15-ish years, and you're gonna pay that off. And if you can get some kickbacks from the feds to pay that off sooner, push your utility bills down. So there's some really good discussion points here if the district is interested in pursuing that. This is the full list of items that we identified, and then how they trickle down through other lines in the overall project budget. So as you look at the ones in the top, you see the additional wall insulation, roof insulation in the windows, the deletion of the pre-K flex room, the other floor plan changes that we mentioned, geothermal, and then the outdoor play and learning spaces, adds up to a pretty significant amount of money in the overall reduction. The other ones that I wanted to highlight are the results of some changes in the guidance from the Maine Department of Education and how they build public school projects, and those are around the movable equipment furniture and then the movable equipment technology lines. So they've reduced their recommended funding amounts a little bit, about 1.5% on what we would typically carry. So we've included those as a recommendation to take a look at. We can start to dial in some furniture estimates as we kind of get back into this to make sure we're in that good zone, but we're feeling fairly comfortable that we can equip your school but not go overboard on a bonded amount. With the technology, the other options, there are some rebate programs, e-rebates, that we could potentially get some additional monies back from some of those rebates. Those aren't reflected here. They're an unknown at this point, but those are always things that we're tracking. As you move down, a lot of the other sections are directly a function of reducing the construction amounts. So both bid and construction contingency, as we reduce Section A in the budget that we've shown you, it's directly a relationship to that. So we take $1 million out, you save 5%. So those numbers are straight percentages. The same thing with the architectural and engineering services, sustainability coordination, and a few other things of those nature are directly related to changes that we've made in some of these recommendations. The big one that I would like to point out for discussion is the owner's representation. That's something that the district has in the past elected to do in-house. Puts a little bit more of a burden on Scott and Jeff throughout the course of construction, but it's a significant amount of money that could be reduced. So all of these result in about $8.5 million in potential reductions in that 2025 construction start period line. So we've escalated out to that period of when we'd be looking to bid. So what that looks like overall is you take the Part A, B, and C, that adds up to that $80-ish million one that we talked about at the start of this. Deduct out the 8.5, and you're back to about a $74.5 million project cost overall, based on a March to April referendum. And that is the back of the napkin budget update.
So, and to that point, we have not decided on an actual date. I think we are trying to look towards the end of October during the joint meeting to have a board meeting to decide on that. But you needed something to work from to
yeah, absolutely. We needed a starting point. And some of the other presentations that we've made, that April, March is really a great time for us, industry-wise, because it lands you bidding about 12 months after the start of the referendum, which gets us into site work, foundations in warm months. And that's really one of the things that we're looking for. The costs increase pretty significantly if you start into pushing foundations into October, November, December as the weather starts turning. The productivity goes down, the expenses go up. The other thing, if you remember, there's some back-end concerns as well about the long-term duration and when you would move into this building. So those are some of the things that led us to use that February, March, April-ish timeline. Anything in that zone works well for this budget.
So this is really our chance as a board to understand what's being presented. I know I've had some opportunities to leading up to today's presentation to talk through some of these. So I just really welcome questions from the board on what Tyler's presented. Hi, Denny.
Tyler?
Yes.
Denny Gallaudet. How are you? I posed this question. I'm not sure it made it through to you, and maybe you don't have an answer, but the question is the EUI of the building.
Yep.
And I remember talking to you initially, you said, well, this is difficult to predict until you actually get the energy engineers into the mix, but you were hoping for the initial plan to be in the 25 to 30 range.
Yeah.
I was wondering, these changes you made, does that put a big dent in the EUI?
It will. So we've been kicking around some numbers. We're pretty confident with the full, unfortunately the 83 million geothermal, lots of insulation and windows, that we're in the mid to low 30s. We're thinking this starts to creep up into the 40s, 45. So
40 would be okay to be thinking about?
I think we could get there. I think it's definitely something that we're going to have to definitely have our work cut out for us. The more load reduction that we take out of the equation, the harder it gets, as you know, to get to those lower numbers. But those are certainly things I think we strive for.
The reason I mention it is that one of the things we have going from a sustainability benefit is the property itself, and the acres of woods, which are sequestering carbon.
Yes.
And these are our own calculations, but you could call this building, I think, a carbon positive, as long as the EUI, doesn't go too much above 40.
Yeah, and I think we will, throughout the process, also be looking at how we're building this building. So our structural engineers are going to be tracking the embodied carbon of the building through primarily, foundations. Concrete's going to suck up a lot of that, the steel and the overall building superstructure. So we'll be tallying up that. Well, actually, the program is called Tally that we use to track that carbon sequestration of the building. So we'll be doing that kind of hand in hand, and we'll be working to reduce the overall carbon impact just as part of our standard design process.
Well, apologize for the nerdy question and your patience in answering it.
No, you're speaking my language. So.
Can you clarify what EUI means?
So it's an energy use intensity, and essentially you add up all of the BTUs that you use. So every 1,000 BTUs that the building uses is essentially 1 EUI. So the lower the number, the better performance that your building is generating. So the lower the number, fewer utility bills. So all of that, the more that we can push that down, the better it is for you long term, especially with the fluctuation in energy prices.
By way of comparison, Mabel I. Wilson is 80, for example. So this would be a substantially more efficient building, just because of its age and the way it's laid out.
All right, Megan?
Can I just go back to a point that you made, which is that you're suggesting a February to April sort of spring time frame for the referendum because it's advantageous in terms of cost because of the foundations.
Yeah, the foundations. Right? The foundations is the number one trigger. So when we have to do winter construction, we've done a lot of it. Some of the challenges, obviously, we live in Maine. Frost is deep penetrating. Some of the things that we have to do is they actually have what's called ground source heaters. They run big tubes all along the excavations. They heat the ground. They're putting blankets over it, and it just becomes incredibly expensive. The other component that goes to that is labor efficiency reduction. So it's estimated that a concrete foreman person is going to do about a 50% efficiency on their overall work in a given day based on the weather. So if it gets cold, they'll get it done, but it's much more of a challenge. So that can add some pretty significant cost overall if we're doing the entirety of the foundations there. What we'd like to do is get those foundations in, start to see the steel go up, and then they start to enclose sections of the buildings with light gauge metal framing and sheathing, and then they start to put temporary heat inside, and you start to regain a lot of those efficiencies. So if we can get construction start, May, June, that's really a great time to get going. It gives us time to get the access road in and get workers to kind of the back side of the site.
Thanks. Is there anything else that goes into that time frame besides what you just covered? Are there any other things that kind of go into that?
So these are the two referendum timelines that we had put together back a little ways. So February, March, April, they kind of all work in a line here. One of the things that we're looking for is that middle area where I've got kind of circled winter construction. So we're keeping a close eye on the duration that we get before that. The other component that you'll see that I've got circled is moving. So it's something that people don't always think about what it actually takes to move 700 kids from one facility, the teachers, all of the components in the building, giving staff time to set the room up. Furniture can't be delivered until the building's done. So if you take a look there, you'll see one of the things that 3 months can do is it puts our 24-month construction duration ending in August, which means that we're doing a phased occupancy of the building. We're moving furniture in when the contractor's still there. And really that's when quality starts to deteriorate. Things get missed. The building shakeout isn't done. Systems aren't up and running. And we're doing that with staff and students in the building, which is a nightmare. So all of those things add cost to the project. You don't want, if we can avoid it, contractors working with students there. Hopefully we'd be outside doing those finishing things. The other piece with that is it gives you just 3 weeks to get furniture set up, your staff moved in and rooms set up. And I can give you the names of a couple other school districts if you want to talk to what that experience is like. It's a real challenge. So those are the things that we look at from both a functional and a cost perspective.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I guess just on the topic of the timeline, since there is, potentially what some might see as a relatively small difference between, particularly if we're looking as far out as April and if we were looking at June, just what is, from your past experience, your level of confidence in kind of these timelines, and what, obviously there are often unforeseen things that can happen.
There are, and there's always risk in these. If we uncover some unsuitable soils or something that's not known, that's one of the things that if you see in the budget, there's a lot of due diligence that goes into that upfront piece. The more testing that we do during design, the less we're going to start to uncover some of those things as we get into construction, which does a couple things. It manages your risk for cost overruns, and it manages the time. And those are, time is almost as valuable as we start the construction as that dollar piece. If a contractor is delayed because of an unforeseen condition, they add general conditions, a lot of other things that just incrementally get much more expensive. So we're going to do a lot of due diligence during that design process to help mitigate those risks. The 12-month design that we've got in there, we're very comfortable with. We've done a lot of these types of projects over the past. We've factored in a couple of major permitting things, right off the bat, getting our main DOT traffic movement permit completed. We've had pre-app meetings with them. We have an understanding what they're looking for. And the other component to that is surprisingly about a 6-month permit review time for the main DEP. This one's going to be they're all complicated. They all take 6 months, but this one will have definitely some other components in it that we'll need to make sure are accurately addressed early on in our pre-application meetings. And all of those things help, again, go to mitigate some of the time risk on the back end. So we're fairly comfortable that we can get this done design-wise out to bid in a 12-month period.
Okay. I'll ask some more questions if you don't mind. So looking at some of the other examples of schools that you've worked with, I'm just wondering if you can give us a, kind of how this compares to other recently completed projects or other proposed projects that you're working on.
Yeah, so we've taken the exact same approach as a couple of state-funded projects that we have in the office. We build our budgets exactly the same way. The other piece is we have been provided the project budgets for, I think, 5 other schools that are either under construction or about to start, and a couple that are about 6 to 8 months ahead of you, ones that have completed their concept design and budgeting. And we're kind of like smack dab in the middle of them. These are all elementary schools primarily, and then a couple of middle schools. The middle schools, the cost creeps up a little bit more because you're building things such as locker rooms and science labs and larger gymnasium spaces, all things that kind of skew some of those numbers that we're looking at. But we're right kind of smack dab in the middle. Some of that's directly related to just the overall design of individual buildings are going to fluctuate somewhat. Historically speaking, it's been a little bit difficult to kind of escalate some of our even 3-year-old projects out because things have been so volatile. We had one project I've mentioned up in Camden that I think when we escalate out gets pretty close to this, which is great. So we're feeling really comfortable about where we are, especially compared to other projects with other firms that we've been kind of just doing that litmus test and making sure that we're not drifting too far. That answer your, I'm not sure it was detailed enough. But
well, helpful to know, I guess, that based on these other schools that you've mentioned, whether it's 5 different projects, that we're falling somewhere in the middle, and there may be more specific questions that we can ask there, but definitely appreciate that overview. And you already mentioned that the middle schools, because I think this question has come up too in terms of the grade configuration, that middle schools would be more expensive to build. I'm guessing high schools would be even more expensive, but as we look at the grade configuration, is this our most cost-effective option?
Yeah, I think, the challenge when you start looking at middle schools and high schools are not just the cost per square foot, but the number of square feet that you take per student. So an elementary school requires the least, smaller kids. They don't have as many specials. When you start getting into middle schools, that's when you're looking at competition basketball courts and other components, especially with multiple teams, practice courts. So everything just kind of gets a little bit bigger. So the state recommends about 140 square feet per student. We're, kind of close to that, a little bit more based on unique programs here. And then it starts getting up to 160, 180, 200 if you're starting to put in CTE and other programs like that in a high school. So not only does the cost per square foot go up, but the building is just much bigger.
And just a couple, or maybe just one more. So you did mention obviously, we can see from the numbers that the costs are rising, and that some of those costs, hopefully, as you said, are leveling out to that 3 or 4% as opposed to maybe the 7 or 8%. But do you see, is there anything that stands out to you as really the drivers of the cost increases that we're seeing in the same project, or where those costs have changed or risen most?
It almost depends on the month. So a lot of times, big numbers that you saw in the differential between the site cost is going to be directly related to fuel. So the site numbers are going to be diesel driven. So as diesel starts to creep up, those numbers creep up because it's trucking, soils, and other things. We're looking at material costs in the neighborhoods, pits that are close by. So those material costs is, a little bit more stable, but the volatility in that market is challenging, especially when you look at a lot of the heavy, it's got a mind of its own. Some of the heavy site costs are going to be things like paving, which is very oil dependent. So, those costs are at the very end of the project. So there's a little bit of volatility there. 2 years ago, it was the price of lumber that drove everything. I don't know if anyone had seen it at Home Depot when plywood had gone through the roof and sheathing had gone through the roof, 2x4s. We're kind of expecting to see that creep back up over the next few months because of, wildfires in Canada, things that you don't really think about, and they trickle down over time into the market. We've seen volatility come down in structural steel. For a while, that was a big one. The word on the street was that Amazon, like 3 years ago, had bought 60% of the long span joist capacity in the country. So no one could get joists for months. So those were things that were, just unexpected. And you try to build your budgets to absorb those somewhere. So, we're kind of taking a look at all of the cost in order to give you some good long-term flexibility and security, but not go overboard on what the ask is. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Going down the line, I guess.
Okay, sure. So Tyler, I wanted to just tell you that I appreciate all the effort that you and your colleagues have made to help us manage the cost of this project. I have to admit, it is really frustrating, though, that we're essentially, like, the more we wait, the more we are paying more for less. But that's just the nature of the beast and inflation. I was wondering if you could talk about a little bit more about the potential for grants, and whether we could continue to bring the costs down through those, or at least get reimbursed down the road.
Yeah, I think there's always opportunity, and some of those site elements that I mentioned. We had I think a couple $100,000 of outdoor play and learning spaces. Those are fantastic opportunities for fundraising through the community. The other one that I mentioned, I think there's just a lot more investigation that we need to do. We've had some conversation, is that Inflation Reduction Act. It essentially works out to a 34% rebate, cash rebate, when the building goes online. And what they look at is the total system cost. It's not just that $2.9 million of geothermal, but they're looking at, all of the HVAC costs for ventilation and heating. They're looking at the building power service. They're looking at, structural elements to support those. So we did some kind of back of the napkin pieces, and we're fairly comfortable that we could get a lot of that back. But again, these are all, the kind of that managing the risk. You have to fund that money up front to get it built. You don't get the rebate until it comes online. So there may not be an appetite to kind of take that risk. We wouldn't know until we get bids from contractors, the system starts, and programs can change, but the people that we've spoken to, they don't seem to think it will. So, there's a lot of risk to some of those bigger ones. Okay. But we'll continue to look at anything that we can find out there.
So that's really helpful, because with the geothermal, that's the biggest ticket item that could be reduced from the package. But it also sounds like it's the most likely that we would get some reimbursement through outside funds.
Yeah, I believe, unless they repeal the program, It's not a competition-based piece, so it's expected to go out 10 years. The thought is that this is really driven as American-made equipment. It's a reinvestment in manufacturing production jobs here in the country. They're thinking that that's enough to keep that from being repealed, because it's really going to go a long way to help, unemployment in different parts of the country. So again, those are things, I'm just the architect, not the IRA economist, but there are definitely some programs out there that I think we should have some conversations of. That same cash back can also benefit the district for photovoltaics. So if you're looking at a production site that's not a PPP, power, sorry, all right. So one that you own, they could potentially get some money back from that as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Tom, you touched on an exact point that we went back and forth on. I was like, of course, the most expensive item we look to remove is the one we think we can get reimbursed for, right?
Sure. I mean, it seems like an easy decision. Like, oh, we can knock 2.7 million off of the sticker price of this whole project, but we could get that money returned in the future.
Yeah.
And the larger piece is that we'd have to fund it up front.
Yeah.
So we'd have to figure out how to fund that somehow in order to do that.
So some of the options that we played around with is actual options on the referendum. And so maybe there'll be a choice with and without geothermal as a potential option. And one of the things that we're going to continue to dig into is what the long-term operating cost differences are if we have that or don't have that. And so I really want to be able to provide that information to our voters.
Kind of on that topic, the current design includes heat pumps, correct?
Yeah, we will still use heat pump technology because, one of the stated goals, and I think it's not something anyone would recommend taking out, is providing air conditioning to this facility. So we would still utilize that. We're still going to come up with a great, efficient building. It's just some of these things, especially when you factor in grants, can save the district a lot of money over time on utility costs.
Right.
So that's kind of finding that happy balance.
And is there any money back on heat pumps at this point? I mean, I know that there are state programs that are pushing that,
so
but I don't know the details.
The other one that we're gonna recommend we go after, and we'll start tracking on day one of design, is Efficiency Maine has a rebate program for a lot of the technologies that we're gonna be putting in here. It changes on a year-to-year basis, but we're confident that there will be some amount of money back. It probably is in the tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but it's still, something that might help offset additional insulation or some of those other costs that are going to, again, give you kind of that payback on the backside.
Hey, Tyler. Thank you so much for all of this. This has been, you're so impressive the way that you're able to answer these questions and present and work on the fly, even if you're not an Apple guy. So I have 9,000 questions, but I'll narrow it down to a couple, as I'm sure all of us are. First, I want to start, you kind of talked about the flex space.
Yep.
And the way I very much worry about getting rid of flex space. I've been a part of some school builds, and knowing what it can provide you and what it can provide teachers is really powerful. But you kind of spoke about it as if you were like, kind of relieved that you reassessed it and you saw some advantages to it. So along that point, are there recommendations here for cuts that you're like, you know what, a second thought, this makes sense to eliminate versus
there are a few things that we could potentially recommend some cuts, but they will start to have a negative impact on the educational side. And that was something that we weren't comfortable bringing a lot of those forward without more discussions. We could take a look at things like, maybe reducing the size of an amphitheater, that indoor space. But when you get past that, there isn't a lot of extra space in this building. We really tried to model this exactly how the state would fund it if this was a state-funded project. Some of the other things, when I mentioned the flex space, we've got some things like allied arts rooms that could serve multi-functions. And when we get, a little bit further into that redesign and we get some plans that are a little bit cleaner, we can show you. Some of the things that we were able to do is kind of move an allied arts room to take the place of a flex room, but we could still put the bathroom in. And if you needed to move an allied arts teacher in there, it still gives you that additional 20-ish students. That's not reflected here. So we're still trying to be cognizant of the fact that things change. You could have a new housing development or something moves into town. that causes a bubble. So we're very, very sensitive on the capacity of this building, understanding that this is entirely a capacity-driven issue for your other facilities.
It's helpful. All right, this is a little bit of a harder question. It's more general.
Okay.
And I understand we're not in-house hunters, but let's just pretend that like you worked off the existing plan, right? So did you find yourself a little restricted by that? Like if you and the team were to look back at this and just say, you know what, they only want to do it for X amount. This is how we would design it based off of that. Versus now, if we went back to the drawing board, this is probably what we would do again. And here's our plan.
So the site makes this an interesting plan because I'm not sure if you've had a chance to walk it yet. And if not, we'll get one scheduled for you. The site kind of has driven the shape of the building. So, we have an access point that brings us down to where the parking lot's shown. We've got some grade change that actually works out really well for that kind of multi-story piece in the back. So it kind of drove us in the direction of the shape. One of the things that when Sarah and I looked at this, we just, trace is cheap. We've got all kinds of this stuff on the floor, and we just started kind of wheeling it off. And that's where we led to some of the things like, rotating a classroom wing back in, rearranging allied art space, kind of looking at that center corridor as a little bit more of a holistic, piece through that piece. I think we're pretty much there. I think we can make some other small changes. We'll keep kind of refining things as we move through design. There might be a chance to, wiggle out a few hundred more square feet. But in the end, so much of this is just the math. You have so many classrooms that's this specific size that we wouldn't recommend going any smaller on. And that's really the only way that we're going to continue to trim square footage. So I think we're kind of hitting that balance. We did change some things just circulation-wise. We moved some stairs around, some other things that we're kind of like, wow, why didn't we think of this, a year ago? And it saved us a little bit of square footage, and we were excited about that. But, we'll keep working on it.
So you say this is the floor, but it's a quality floor, but this would probably be the floor.
Yeah, unless you started making programmatic changes in the way that this building's going to function, I don't see us getting much more than, a couple, we might be able to eke out a couple $100,000, but we're really talking about minor refinements at this point.
Okay.
Can you give an example of what a programmatic change would be?
Something, eliminating a flex classroom, eliminating an allied arts room, taking out the amphitheater, eliminating that flex. We have a little bit of additional square footage in the cafeteria to make sure that we have space if those flex rooms are built. If you had to trim 400 or 500 or 600 square feet out, kind of those are the low-hanging fruit. It's not stuff we would recommend. It's going to really limit your long-term flexibility in the space, where something like an amphitheater is 1,800 square feet, but it's going to have a negative impact on the building program. So those are things that I think the district would need to take a hard look at how this building is intended to function. Having that, a performance space for young children in the building is really important. You're not trucking them over to a large performance center for a book play, something along those lines. So those are the things that, if you had to, those are the kind of the areas that you'd probably start looking, but they're going to have an impact on the function of this building.
Yeah. Channeling Tim there and recalling the meeting at North Yarmouth that you attended, and I think our colleague who's sitting right in front of you attended as well. A person raised their hand and said, and I did the number, this is $1.9 million per classroom. I can't get my mind around how one classroom would cost $1.9 million.
It doesn't.
I'm not asking you to answer it, but I'm just saying, I think our voters will think in those terms. And so Tim's question, well, we have some flex classrooms. There's 3 flex classrooms there. Is that $6 million if we eliminated them? I know it's not, but I'm just trying to get you in the mindset of what the audience might be trying to just relate to their own personal experience.
Yeah, this one, that line right there, that's one classroom. $375,000.
Okay, so not one.
So the challenge, I think, no, the challenge is when you start to factor in that the building is a lot more than a specific dedicated classroom. You've got administrative spaces and mechanical, and you've got a gymnasium and a cafeteria and all these other things that make a building and make those programs work. So if you kind of just back it out and just look at what one classroom is by dividing the entirety, you've kind of not really taken an honest look at what's in this building.
Yeah, I know that. I was just trying to.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Just trying to pitch, what people who aren't familiar or just
right.
coming to the meeting for the first time would be thinking.
I'll go back and be quiet over here.
You might as well say that it's like an $80 million gym that they have. Like, you can't decide what you want to divide it up into.
Football stadiums is sort of beyond my comprehension,
Yeah.
for example, but it works for some people.
I wanted to make a point.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I really appreciate all the work you've done, and I was truly fearful of how much you wouldn't be able to find. So $8.5 million potentially is way more than I expected. So thank you. But I also want to reiterate a point that you made, that the building, because it's for elementary level, it is relatively, well, definitely less expensive than it would be for middle schoolers or high school. And I make that point because so many people have commented that this much money for an elementary for little kids, but this is what it costs, and we are reducing it. And I guess I understand correctly, it would be more if it were for the bigger kids,
Yeah.
correct?
It would. Yep.
Okay.
Who's ready?
Okay, thanks. So I have a couple questions too. Thank you, Tyler. It's, good to see you, although I wish that you didn't have to keep coming back to do this. But okay, so first of all, and you've addressed it, but if you could speak to it in terms of what we're cutting in terms of energy efficiency versus what savings we might have seen if we had kept those in. Do you feel like you have struck the right balance there, or?
I think we have. We're anticipating that the state is going to formally adopt the 2021 or something more stringent on the energy code. It's going to push us to do a lot more of these things. We had really made an honest effort to really push the envelope on the energy efficiency. We talk a lot about, we've talked about oil, we've talked about gas prices. All of those things have a direct relationship, whether you're heating with those, if you're using electricity, if you're generating those on site. All of those things are going to be expensive. So we have to take a look at what the cost benefit is. You're probably going to pay off wall insulation and roof insulation in maybe 10 to 15 years. After that, you just start seeing the savings. So it's finding the balance. Would I trade those insulation systems to make sure that we get students into a safe, appropriately built school? Absolutely. But those are things that I think that we could take a look at some bid alternates and maybe buy those back if things come in well, if the escalation isn't as far. And then if it doesn't work out, that we've made a conscious decision, we've worked on a really great building system that's still energy efficient, is going to give you some of that long-term flexibility. So I think we've hit that spot. Okay. We're going to still have a very efficient building. The numbers that we've been talking about are fantastic. So, we'll push the envelope. Our engineers love this kind of stuff. They love eking out every BTU here. So we'll be able to get you something that I think you'll be happy with in the long run. But we could do you a little bit more on the energy savings if that's where the priorities are.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's a balancing act of how much to pay up front versus how much to save. So thank you for that. Can you speak or just kind of remind everyone, as far as the permits and the fees for the land use, wetlands, things like that, can you remind us what that number is going to be and if there's any flexibility there?
I'm just going to double check that number so I don't. So the major thing, there's a number of permit fees that we're going to have in this project regardless. So we're going to have a lot of applications through the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, DOT rather, transportation. Those things are going to be the same whether we're doing wetland impacts or not. So those kind of are the same. The big one is the wetland impact fee. And this is a direct relationship to the impact by square footage. That number is right now sitting between $380,000 and $390,000. So it's a big number. We have been working on ways to kind of reduce that impact. We haven't found a lot more than a few hundred square feet here and there, but that's something that's definitely on our mind, is ways to minimize that impact. I reached out to our natural resource protection person that actually helps us with that permit. She said that she has not seen a district actually get a waiver yet, but there is a section on the application for alternative applications. There may be some partnerships with other entities in town or other things that we can investigate. She said she hasn't seen it yet, but I think she's as eager as us to give things that kind of the old college try.
Okay, so the other fees were pretty standard. Would you
Yes.
say the wetlands fee is the only one that
Yeah,
is?
the wetland impact is really the big one. There are a few other tests, some soil testing and other things that we've had to do that are some smaller costs, but really that's the big irregular piece on this budgeting versus a standard or other school projects that we've worked on.
So you said a little under 400.
Just under 400.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. As far as, and I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm curious, given that you are an architect and therefore know more than me, where the portables are right now. You've been on the campus, you've seen that. You look at the portables and you think, oh, there's a wing. That's a wing of the building. And if we just made it 2-story, we're done. We've got some common space, we've got those classrooms. As an architect, can you explain why or whether that is an option?
So, yeah, I'm going to do my best. So there will be a few qualifying pieces in here. We can build a wing pretty much where those portables are. If you remember back, I'm not sure if anyone remembers the campus option that we had put together. We had a wing going in there to make up for some of the spaces that were going to be lost in that project. The big challenge is that if you're going to continue to increase the enrollment of that school, is that you're going to hit the max of gymnasiums, cafeterias, libraries, the need for additional program spaces for art, music, all those allied art spaces. And that's where it really starts becoming a lot more compressed on the campus. If we had to add a supplemental gym or a multi-purpose room, all of a sudden you're talking, 3,000-4,000 square foot box in the middle. So I think the challenge is going to be, yeah, you could probably build the classrooms, but you could never get all of those supporting things that you need for that increase of total population in the building. And then you're going to be still back with the challenge of what to do at the middle school in a few years as we've kind of shifted that problem out of Mabel I. They're going to hit their max, and then they're going to hit the middle school. So I think it's really finding that balance. I think you're going to lose fields, move parking, move roads in order to make something like that work. And then you're going to be back to having the disagreement between the town and the DOT on what the offsite improvements are going to be and whether those could be mitigated through other avenues. So there's a lot more kind of moving pieces there. So I'm going to say that maybe I don't know.
Okay. Well, to the average person, you drive by, you see the portables, and you just think, oh, there could be a building there. And again, for those of us who are not trained in that, it's very easy to think that. But I'm just trying to put out there have you put out there some of the costs that the average person wouldn't be thinking about.
And they're great questions. When we looked at the previous campus option, we had the ability to utilize that 2.5 acres kind of heading up the hill and then utilize a lot of shared space. It gave us some opportunities that you don't necessarily have now, with a lack of contiguous additional space on the campus. So without displacing fields, I think you'd have a hard time addressing all of those individual needs on campus unless you acquired more property.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing, and this isn't necessarily a question for Tyler, but I would like to revisit the idea of the performance space at the proposed building. And I totally understand, thinking about a kindergartner who's going to practice. Do they still do the 3 Piggy opera for kindergartners? Anyway, so, thinking about what that does to the day of having to go over to the GCA to practice, but if that is a savings to not have a stage or to rethink that space, I think that does allow more use of the GCA, and I think the kids would be excited to be in the GCA where the big kids are, so I would encourage us to rethink that.
I just wanted to piggyback on that because that's one thing that I was thinking of through this conversation as well. Right now we've removed the stage at MIW, in part though because of capacity and we need that additional space for lunches. But my children personally have not been involved in any sort of activities that would involve a stage at this point. And my son's now in 4th and my daughter's in 2nd. And I also wonder if, though, I can see some downsides of using the GCA for kids that age, because it is a very big space, but could we use the North Yarmouth Community Center? it's closer. It's, you know, a very nice space. I don't know, just something to think about. And then aside from that, I did also just want to thank you, Tyler, for bringing this information to us. I didn't have any other thoughts now that I'm at the end of the line that my colleagues have not mentioned, but I look forward to continuing this discussion to see any additional changes or what comes next.
Can I follow up on one of Kim's points? Is that possible?
Yes, please. And I was just, with the picture, I was just hoping Tyler could show us what is being talked about.
Oh yeah, thank you.
So it's the
kind of like lime green color.
Okay. And do you know the square footage?
Somewhere between 1,800 and 2,000 when you get into the storage space associated with it.
Okay. And so the cost would be then, sorry, come on, Tyler.
maybe $800,000.
Okay.
So the other component to that, we've got the wall that separates the cafeteria in that space. It's designed to be an operable partition so that you kind of open that up into a larger space, give you some overflow. Indoor recess is one of the big challenges I think that you're going to face in this building with the number of kids, and trying to find kind of that trike track. We sometimes call it that. So if you can kind of loop them a hallway through the caf and give them some activities on a rainy day, that's some of the reasons why it's located where it is.
Because you would need to do indoor recess while lunch is going on, I'm assuming.
Well, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So sorry, Tim.
That's okay. I just want to follow up on Kim's because I this for the last couple of years, whether on the board or not, I've been trying to figure out, like, right now we've had like one option ahead of me, and that's really difficult because I think a lot of people push back and like this is the only option. But it was interesting to talk about the on the school option because you can start seeing the cost benefit of it. So you just kind of explained that you'd have to move fields. Like, it's possible. You could do it, right? We could build a wing. You could probably figure out a way to expand the gym, and you could move the fields and reconfigure some stuff. If we did all that, and I know you couldn't give us any kind of ballpark, but would the whole total cost, do you think, get into the ballpark, what we're talking about right now? Or would you be like, that's a pretty big cost savings? So that's something for you guys to consider when going forward with all this.
Can I raise one point though?
Yeah.
Is the tough thing about that is that then that would now be permanent space, which would trigger the change in the DOT.
Right, that's a cost to it, right? Like
but the town of Cumberland has said we will not do that. They have categorically.
I don't think that's correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wouldn't say, like, there's a lot of unknowns, I think, with an on-campus option. We've pressed Tyler just recently again on what this would look like, what this could look like, what are the opportunities, what are the issues, and so yeah, go ahead.
I can't give you a number on the costs. I can tell you my gut tells you that you're going to exceed what we're talking about here, just from the dollar sense. One of the concerns that I have about the on-campus option, if you're not acquiring additional land, is really going to be how this campus starts to change. Right now, you've pushed all of your parking, your buildings are kind of on the perimeter, and you've kind of built your green spaces and your fields and your play areas kind of toward that middle. And if we drop a building onto one of those and then surrounded by parking and a couple little playgrounds, I think it's going to really change the entire feel and the function of this campus, whether you can recreate those off campus, at Twin Brooks, somewhere else. I think that there's going to be a real negative impact on the student experience on campus. I think you have the square footage to do it. We did something very similar over in Falmouth, on the last day of school, they had their soccer championship, and then the next day we dug the field up and built an elementary school. It can be done. They had more land, but I just think the trade-offs on your experience, your education, and the cost is going to get there. Recreating a track and a stadium field and all the associated pieces with it are very expensive. We looked at just replacing for the track. I think it was in the $3-ish million range. And if we start to expand, turf field, if you start to expand all those other facilities and infrastructure, you're looking at big dollars. And I think that you're going to kind of quickly exceed that piece and then trigger a lot of other stormwater, traffic, and other permitting things that are going to drive things on this campus to be more expensive. It's something we could certainly take a look at, though, if you.
No, I think it's just important for people to know where the journey has come from, right? And like that a lot of these things have been considered, the pros and cons and stuff. Yeah. And like I'm coming into this kind of late, right? But I do think it's important for people to know that like this is an expensive option. Like right? People see this as an expensive option, so they're like, well, we can't afford it, or we can do something else. And can we do something else, right? Because it keeps getting more expensive. And so I'm always open to the fact that I don't want us just to be stuck on one thing unless it continues to make sense. And right now it seems like it's continuing to make sense. But
I would encourage people to take a look back, and forgive me on the dates, but somewhere in the 19 to 20 range. If you look at your website, we have kind of the historical PowerPoints from the building committee meetings that we did then. We had options where we looked at, a pre-K, early childhood education center on campus. We had one where we looked at additions to Mabel I, additions to the middle school. And they really didn't get traction for a lot of the things that we've talked about tonight. But I think that all of those things are posted on your website now if you're interested. And if you can't find the specific dates, have Jeff reach out to me and I'll track them down for you.
Thank you.
Taylor, you were kind enough to send me your 2021 presentation at North Yarmouth to a joint standing committee. And I believe the number you had working at that time 2 years ago was $63 million for an on-the-campus project.
Yeah, that was
yes.
2020, 2021.
Am I right?
Yeah.
That is correct.
That is correct.
Yeah,
So
somewhere
if
in that.
you take the escalation since then, we're not talking about saving major money by trying to cram it on, I think. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, it definitely does. And the other piece is that you don't have access to the land that we were utilizing to make that work now.
And so, and Tyler does know that we have the 2 additional acres, but there was there more than those 2 additional acres that was built into that plan?
It was a different 2.5 acres.
It was a different 2.5 acres.
They involved moving the superintendent's office, the Sweetser School, which would have allowed that building to happen, and this would not, the land that we just purchased would not be the right configuration.
Okay. And I think, yes, the DOT was a consideration. The other consideration was a concern that the buildings as presented for that cost would be full when they opened. That is correct. That was, honestly, I think one of the biggest concerns is that they would be full based on projections when it opened.
And not only full, but exceeding what our district has established as a reasonable number for students in a building, correct? You brought this up a couple meetings ago, Jeff, that
because it was only moving. It was only moving to the first grade would be the new building, right?
Well, not even a new building. If we add the wing, then how many students would be at Mabel Wilson?
It was the middle school that was most problematic because it would have to stay a 5-8 building in order for this to work, and I believe it was a 2-4 building at the Wilson School, and it was a K1 building that was being built.
Right, but what I'm saying, if we just add to Mabel Wilson and we add to the middle school, not building a brand new building, but adding these wings that look like they could be added.
Yeah, we're 1,000, over 1,000 students.
I would add, we just moved a historic building on the USM campus, very similar to your Sweetser School, and the numbers that came back cost-wise blew my socks off. It was unbelievably expensive to move that facility. So I think we'd have to take a hard look at that, how viable that really would be.
And because we just talked with Tyler about this last week, one of the other things that I thought was interesting, because Falmouth is brought up a lot in comparison, when they were building the elementary school, they had their students off sites in other schools while that construction was going on. So that's the other consideration. While we'd be constructing this school on campus, we'd have the same number of kids throughout the term still accessing all the schools on this campus versus Falmouth, who had, was it 2 other schools, or at least one other school?
They were off campus, and we structured a number of things in order to make that work, where we front-loaded a new wood chip boiler, we front-loaded a new stadium field, so if you've been down to their field, those are all front-loaded. We built additional fields across the street all before we started that middle school or elementary school construction. We can do all these things. They have a cost implication. There's phasing, other pieces that will add additional expense to a project, make it a little bit more complex. But again, it really comes down to square footage. You're looking at the same square footage in these buildings, that number's fixed, and we kind of move around the site development costs.
I just want to make sure we give everyone an opportunity. Tommy, Sophia?
Yeah, one question that I had that is relating to the cost cut measures. When looking at, like, for example, insulation, obviously that's gonna be felt in operating costs being higher. But say when you're taking about $3 million out of the budget by eliminating geothermal, does that increase the sticker cost of having different heating, or is that just kind of felt in the residual costs each year?
That money, it's a great question. So the money that we're showing as a reduction is the difference between the new system that we would be putting in there. And we'd still have to work out some of the details and then go into the full geothermal. A lot of that expense is site related. So we have a lot of piping that goes out, and then there's 90 wells. It's essentially what makes up geothermal systems. So they're 500 feet deep. They're interconnected with a lot of piping, and all goes back to the building. So that $3 million-ish is primarily in wells and piping. The differential is still in that construction amount. So that's a true savings.
Okay. Would not having that cause other heating measures to increase?
I don't think so. I mean, your building load will always be the same. So if we can increase the amount of insulation, it drives down the load, and that's where you're going to see your utility savings. But the load is going to be the same whatever system we had. So if you had an oil boiler, it's the same amount of load. Was that your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I just had a general question, which I'm sure has been answered, but it's more for Mr. Porter. Like, we're talking about how the middle school, the elementary schools have all been like reaching their limits, but what happens when we get to the high school? Like, do we have the room now?
That's a great question. The high school historically, we do have more capacity at the high school. The district has had larger enrollment numbers. I think when we were looking at this at last meeting was in about 20 years ago, our numbers were about 200 higher than they are now. And then because we had additional buildings in our district, and so we did have higher student populations in the past. So what's the exact, do you know those numbers right now?
Well, the high school was probably, I think it reached 750 at one point, and right now we're at 625 today, and we're at one of the lowest years in the predicted enrollment. So the building can handle more. We just have more programs than there were 20 years ago. There's far more programs. We have, pathways. We have special education programs that have been added. So the rooms in this building are definitely more than, we'd have to really analyze that. But in terms of just to generally answer your question, and I've talked to the high school administration about this, when a high school has a little bit more flexibility because a teacher's room is not used the entire day, and we don't schedule classes into every single room where a teacher has a prep block. So that room might be empty, not all the time, but many times a teacher's room is empty for that 80-minute block that they have a prep or whatnot. They don't have a class in there. So we would have to rethink how we schedule so that we're scheduling classes in like a college would. Every block there would be a schedule, and staff would have to work somewhere else in the building instead of working in their room. So that's the general answer. And so we have looked at it, and we believe that we still would be okay with 700 students or more than 700 students.
I can bear personal witness. My daughter graduated in the class of 2005 in those bump years, and the high school seemed to be fine. Mm-hmm. It was never an issue.
Right. And there were some additional classrooms with when the GCA was added too. Is that correct?
Yes, two additional classrooms, actually 3, because we use the conference room mostly as a theater classroom. Mm-hmm. Plus we use the GCA itself. Yeah, good point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Megan?
Can I ask just one more question, going back in time to the idea of building on the existing campus? And the number that you threw out was 63 million. That was a few years ago. So the number would be potentially higher than what we're talking about now. And would it take significantly longer to perform construction on the campus because the campus is full of kids? And how do you do that?
Yeah, so the plan at the time, so if you look at the site where the Sweetser School, the superintendent's office is, and then head up Main Street, mm-hmm. There's about 2.5 acres. And what that allowed us to do is utilize that space to construct a new pre-K to 1 school, which would have pulled those grade levels out. So the original plan was to build that school, which would take about 2 years, move over to start the additions at Mabel I. Wilson, the 12 to 18 months, all of these kind of moving pieces. So that was a phased project. As you look at those, they're more complex, they take longer. They kind of work out in the end when you look at them overall. Timing wise, you're probably looking at a 4-year project instead of 3, maybe 4.5 years. All of those things add risk because you're bidding a project out much later in a bond cycle, so you're kind of escalating out. You know, the volatility is what we look at when we're looking at that escalation, and how comfortable you are looking at that long-term piece. So, I mean, to answer your question, it was a phased project. It would take a significant amount of additional time to build out that full capacity.
Okay, thank you. I know you sort of touched on it, and I'm asking partly to clarify in my mind, but partly so that it's on the record and that we can go back and use this. So I really appreciate you clarifying.
Ask away. We've been working. I think this is the third or fourth option that we've presented. So we're happy to answer as many questions. Try to give you that historical background as you ease into these projects. So ask away.
Just have a couple other little quick follow-ups, and I also quickly did the math that if we were looking at about a 14% increase as we were for the 80 Gray Road numbers, that it would be about 72 million for the on-campus option. I think you all can check my math, but so then the questions that I had, going back to the wetland impact permit, you mentioned the possibility of a waiver and then something about alternatives with local organizations. I was wondering if you could say more about that.
Well, this is the piece that we're waiting for more clarification on from our natural resource. She said at the end of the big, long, 4-inch thick pile of paper, there's an alternative section where you can propose, off-site mitigation, other components. She said we could include it in that section and petition them for it. But the impression that I get is that she's not optimistic that they're going to do anything other than cash the check. Mm-hmm. So we have to go through the process is really what I think she was saying, and we would do our best to minimize those and see if we can get some creative juices flowing with them.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't know if there were any partnerships that we should be
thinking
about there.
I think we'd have to get into the discussions with them on what they'd be looking for other impact reduction.
Okay.
But it's something that we're definitely looking to explore other creative ways in our community with either land trusts or towns, or talking to our representatives to see if there's going to be some more opportunities in the future with some of these costs.
Great. And then I appreciated some of the comments from other board members about the amphitheater. Excuse me. When I heard the potential other opportunities for reduction, that was one that stood out to me as one that I thought we should look at more carefully. And in terms of the indoor recess concern, I wonder, at least in years where we're not to capacity of needing to use flex rooms as classrooms, perhaps that's a space that helps with that as well.
Those could. Those spaces are really designed to be dynamic, that they're going to serve a lot of functions. They're not necessarily a program space, so they could be available at different times. And it's about 1,000 square feet per room, depending on which floor you're on. We'll give you some really good opportunities to break things out for puzzle times or crafts or other things that they're doing. So those are absolutely options for those.
The only other thing I'd want to mention is, since we've reviewed a few things, is we have looked at other sites, and I believe we understand as a board this is the best site, but that is something that has been done and been considered and reconsidered, and there's been outreach to find other sites, and this is the site. Just want to put that out there, that's why we're talking about this site.
Yeah, and this is the third design, Tyler, that you've completed for us. We had the one in North Yarmouth behind the community center. That was the first one. The second one was the one that was on site with the 2.5 acres in the Sweetser School displaced. And this is now the third design. And we have looked at a lot of different properties. In fact, a previous board had tried to put down an option agreement on a different piece of land, and we didn't get it. It was such a hot real estate market. But this was probably 3 years ago. 3 years ago. So that fell through.
Can't remember if that was.
There's been all kinds of different iterations of this and options that we've explored.
And we also talked, if we were to go and say, okay, we want like a new design for on campus, despite all the things that we brought up, it would be, you said 14 months to get us back to where we're sitting here today with a cost proposal.
Yeah, that a rough guesstimate. We're getting pretty good at designing concepts for you, so we might be able to trim that up. But there's a lot of things outside of our control with, make sure we're working with the town and DOT and all those other entities. So some of those just take time. So I think a 12-month is a reasonable approach.
So, Tyler, again, thank you for, going back and trying to look at it with some fresh eyes. I just want to also say that I've had a front seat to how Leanne has been going about this, and I have been really impressed by the way our board chair has been asking some tough questions and pushing on some things that I don't know had been asked before. They might have been, but it's been great to watch you really listen to the community, look at every line item and say, how can we be creative about this? So just in case there's any question, Leanne has been working really hard to get that 8 million, not harder than Tyler, but working really hard.
They did almost hang up on me the other day when I suggested a number I'd like to see, so.
I think we were like, I'm not sure that's possible.
Hey, you gotta ask, right? So other questions. I know the one question for me is it did seem like there was some interest to see a reduction on the, so what are we calling that green space?
We've called it a multi-purpose amphitheater, essentially.
The multi-purpose amphitheater?
Yep.
So we didn't have like any official vote or anything scheduled on this today, but it sounds like the board would like to consider adding a potential cost reduction by removing that space. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that something that the board would like to see on that list for cost reductions?
I think I also, though, would want to be sure that we're hearing from administrators at MIW in terms of, because is part of it that we're just physically unable to use anything like that at the moment because of capacity issues. I don't want to remove something that would result in other unintended programming consequences, but it is something that I would like to explore.
I'd agree. I'd want to have input from the teachers as well.
Actually, I'm going to their staff meeting tomorrow, but I also know that, Tyler, that you're coming to meet with the Mabel Wilson staff in a month. Depending on where this is going, we're going to update the staff at the school. So we can certainly, talk about that. But I think at this point, if the board is looking to make a reduction, that's something that you have to decide. Mm-hmm. And I think it could be that you don't have to take a vote. You can just direct that Oak Point, explore that, see what the actual reduction would be, what would it look like, and then see if that's how feasible it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could take a look at two different things. We could take a look, the halfway 1,000 square foot standard stage versus the full open concept amphitheater. So we can give you a couple different numbers.
Okay.
And Tyler, can I ask you too about the cafeteria? Can you remind the board how many students can fit in that cafeteria for a given meal?
So what we've done is we've sized it for 1/3 of the capacity of the school. Okay. So you take the pre-K out because I think they're likely going to eat either in their rooms or elsewhere. So you take 1/3 of the capacity, and that's what we've tried to make it. So 3 lunches. We've built in the square footage for those flex rooms so that if your population does increase, that you're not going to be pinched in there. So that's really what is driving that square footage. It's just a formula.
Okay. Thank you.
So obviously we've had a lot of conversations about the overall cost, but I think the question that a lot of people, including myself as a taxpayer in this district, is so what does this mean for me? And I know to be able to start to answer that question, to get us in a place where we feel like we can start communicating some of the information from the cost side, I think we need to, I guess, how concrete of a number do we need to settle on for Scott to be able to start and work through your process with, what we have to do as a district, what we have to do with our towns, what does that look like, and where does that lead us? Because I really am looking forward to the joint meeting at the end of October to be able to talk through this in a little more concrete terms from the cost perspective.
Yeah, I think at this point, what I'm going to use is the number that was in this budget, this 74, and run off that, 74 and a half, and run off that number to create bond and debt service schedules and what that might look like, just so we're prepared for that.
Okay. So does that make sense to the board? Because we need a number to work off of to be able to start creating those schedules to understand, the tax impact.
Yeah, we have to create cash flow schedules, look at our bond anticipation notes, and then what that looks like in comparison to when we actually take on the full debt.
And what would we like to be in the position to present from a cost perspective at that October meeting? So what does that look like?
I would anticipate being able to provide a debt schedule, a plan of financing, and also what the impact will be to the mill rate for the towns. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd be talking to both the managers about that.
Great. Okay.
I would ask if it's easier to go down. So if like your estimate now, is it easier for you if we were to say the higher estimate and then we're going to look at each of these recommendations to cut, is it easier for us to be like, no, it's not going to be that, it's going to be subtraction, or is it later easier for us to add up? Like, for example, I'm concerned about you being the project manager or whatever that line item is, right? Like that might be one I'm like, I don't know, we need someone with a full-time.
I mean, you could certainly look at that. I mean, we've done it on all the other projects here.
But is it easier to build up or go down, or does it matter?
It's not going to matter either way. So the numbers are out there right now. I mean, we just presented them. Okay, so let's take the lower number and work off that for now.
Okay.
Will we have the operating costs projected for the October 25th meeting?
So I can answer some of that. The operating costs we did we do have an operating budget from before.
Right.
So we did start looking at that operating budget again to see what tweaks and changes we would make. And Tyler actually prompted us a little bit more on doing that when we met with him last week. And I haven't given you those updated numbers yet, but we've got to work on that.
Okay.
And yeah, the energy costs and any potential impacts from the changes.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the extent of the operating costs that people are looking for? I guess that would be my question. Is that labor? Is that busing, staffing, just energy costs? What is that people are looking for? Because there's only so much that we can provide in terms of what the knowns are right now.
Yeah, what was it that we had included in the previous calculations?
Yeah, we did have what we were comfortable providing at the time, and I think all the kind of what we estimated to be the knowns. Obviously, staffing, we're moving most of our staff over to a new building. So we looked at all those pieces, and we just need to do it again.
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be a huge change in staffing or labor or the operations budget, but I think with the geothermal, that might add something that Tyler's going to have to help us with on an annual basis. But I think we'll start with the budget we had before, the operating budget that we used for the November 22 referendum, and then work from there.
Did it include busing, our previous calculations?
I don't remember. Tyler, do you remember?
Would you say busing? It did.
Okay.
We made an
I
assumption.
think it had the purchase of X number of buses and drivers, I believe.
Okay.
It was an assumption that we did.
Yeah, I think the challenge with that one is that it didn't reflect any state subsidies in the last one, so it was kind of the worst case.
Mm-hmm. And I think we came out it was the worst case, and it was maybe a month leading up or within the last month or so before the referendum. So I feel like we're going to be in a much better position now to have those estimates months and months in advance.
I would just make an observation from my business career on this. I think you were being very honest about the $2 million, but it's 5 years from now. And furthermore, you have a big budget $47 million. And is it really $2 million of incremental costs? Or could you find a way to sort of move a little bit here, a little bit there? I'm not trying to say that, you shouldn't be factual about it, but it was quite a large number. I mean, if it's 2 million, that's on top of the debt service of 6. So the mill rate impact is large there. And with a businessman with a $47 million budget, think about what would really be incremental, that you couldn't kind of work around and figure out
as I
the overall budget.
recall, sorry, Denny, did I
That's
speak over?
all I'm saying. It could be a flashpoint, and it's a difficult thing to put a number on 5 years from now.
Yeah, it is.
So,
Yeah, I was just going to say, as I recall, the operating budget also included the savings of not leasing the
it was small. It
portables,
was only
which was about
400,000. It was only
right, but it's going to be much higher.
Well, anyway, I'm just saying that it's a long way in the future and difficult to predict.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just kind of checking in about what the costs are of the portables that would then come off, and it would be interesting to see how that affects the operating
We're definitely going to
budget.
have that information. And I agree with Denny. I think we did, as I remember back, 18 months now, or maybe a year, 14 months now. We created what we were trying to be as accurate as possible, but probably
You were
provided
doing it in
a
a
little
hurry,
bit
too.
too much information in terms of we overguessed. Like, okay, we don't want to undersell this. We've got to make sure we have at least the
I'm not
information that
asking
we
you to be
can.
devious, but it's a pretty ephemeral kind of forecast you're being
It's
asked
very
to
difficult.
talk about.
We
As
struggled
opposed to the
with it.
debt service, which is going to be online, next month.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, we struggled with it, trying to figure something out, but it was our best guess at the time.
Okay. Any last words for us, Tyler?
I would just say, keep the questions coming, funnel them through Jeff or Scott, and we'll do our best to get the information for you.
I so appreciate. It's been great to work more directly with you over the past few months as we've been continuing to prepare for what's ahead with this revised project. And so we've invited Tyler to come back for the joint board meeting, and then back again for a meeting with MIW. Is that is that what you
Yes.
said?
Yep. Tyler's making a lot of appearances in the next month.
And we wish he lived here, but he doesn't. You're not far away. You're in Maine, but.
Leanne?
Yes.
Just one other thing.
Sure.
As it comes to mind. And that is how to think about what you, with your hard work, and Jeff have accomplished. You've accomplished an over 10% cost reduction, right? And not get anchored on the fact that, but I'm sorry that it's the same that it was 2 years ago. You should be thinking, we had a two-year-old project 2 years ago. It would cost today this. It was too much. We knocked 10% off. We knocked 12% off, and that's a huge accomplishment. And I think that for those who might think that you're just not being tough enough, that's the wrong conclusion to draw.
I appreciate that, but also know that I'm not settling exactly where we are today either. I think we're going to continue to work through all the angles and opportunities that may exist now or in the future that we don't know about yet, to pay for things that we may have to bond to save this community money. And so I'm very committed to that personally, not only in this role, which I don't intend to be chair when this school opens. But regardless of my role as a member of this community, finding ways and opportunities to save our community funds, which includes talking with our representatives to see what programs could exist in the future. Because right now with school construction, it's all or nothing. There's a list. It's a very long process to get on the list. They only choose a very small percentage of schools that even make the list. And then every other school who has needs doesn't get any capital funding. So these are conversations that we're going to continue to have.
Right. And I think within the community too, I think there are opportunities that we need to keep pressing on. And so I think we have some, opportunities that we're looking at right now. So.
And strategically planning with both Cumberland and North Yarmouth is at the forefront. And we're really excited to have the meeting at the end of the month.
Right. This can't just be an SAD answer or solution or whatnot. This has to be a complete community effort, and we appreciate both towns helping us at this point in time get there.
Yeah, it's been a great collaboration so far. So, okay.
That's it.
I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler.
So we're going to move to the superintendent's report, but as we do, I think I kind of gave a high level overview. Please keep sending questions. We are going to, this information is now public, right? It's been posted, this is being recorded, and this is all going to prepare us for the joint meeting to start, going through more of these details, what are opportunities for reductions that people want to continue with, which ones should we consider not continuing with. And so we're going to look to continue that conversation with both towns at the end of the month, and then help work together to decide a referendum date. But it's a vote of the school board that decides the date.
Can I add to that real quick? Just that the importance of reaching out to us to ask questions. It is a lot of information, and we could have the greatest website, FAQ section, all of that. But the average person to try to find a quick answer to a question, I think I can speak for every other fellow member of the board that if you reach out and ask us, simply email us and say, can you explain this? We are happy to answer that. And unfortunately, we've experienced some times where our local newspaper, The Forecaster, has gotten some things wrong. We've alerted them, they've gone back and corrected it, but by then it's already out there. So we genuinely want to be a primary source of information to the community. So please do not be shy. If you disagree with that, we can take your email off of the list. But yeah, please reach out to us, because we would love to show you where that information is and answer for you.
Agreed.
Okay. Superintendent's report.
All right, superintendent's report for October 2nd. At Greeley High School, we had our consultant, Lawrence Alexander, came back and talked with all of our students last week about the power and impact of words, and there was probably Tommy and Sophia will mention it later, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but there was a lot of prep work that went into that assembly, and I think it was well received, but I'll let them talk about that later. At Greeley Middle School, the fifth grade students acted out Phases of the Moon. This was a project that's gone on with a lot of our classes at 4th and 5th, so this was kind of the latest iteration there you can see, and I don't know what solar system mysteries there are out there, but I think some of our students have solved many of them. In fact, we've had 2 students who are alumni who have gone on to do amazing things in the world of astronomy. As we know, we've had recently, one stopped an asteroid. Well, it was an asteroid that was never going to hit Earth, but it was a test that might have had that. And now I'm forgetting the other one, but science is a huge area for us, and so this is where it begins, right here. Actually begins at Wilson School. As mentioned, the work continues on the new playground, and it sounds like in a week's time, according to Mr. Poulin, the playground will be just about complete. And for your calendar, we have a student flu clinic. We're offering that again on Thursday, October 26th. I know this has been very well received and popular, and having our students received their seasonal flu shots, and so we're able to do that again. We're partnering with Northern Light on that endeavor. Thank you to the nurses for arranging this. And I just wanted to call attention. I know a lot of people do read the newsletter or see the newsletter, but just putting out a second plug here. I'm in this is actually the third week now where I'll be addressing different strategic priorities and just getting into a little bit more detail. So if you don't see the newsletter, you don't get it, we have a place where you can subscribe. Last week, talking about really the meat and potato of the strategic plan, which is what happens in the classroom each and every day, the academic pieces, and where our focus is, and then where each school and department in our district puts their emphasis on academics this year. So just kind of putting a plug out there. We also have a new YouTube channel. We took 2 channels and put them together and made it into one amazing YouTube channel for MSAD 51, and I hope you check it out. We don't just have board meetings anymore. I know everyone, that's the first place they want to go is a board meeting. However, we have so many other categories, and I couldn't put it on this because it was a screenshot, but there's athletics. You want to see a streamed athletic event, check it out. You want to see arts programs or presentations from students that we've got up there, check it out. We've got it up there. So please visit our YouTube channel. It is far more robust. And then in the Rangers Rock Encore Edition, just a little bit more on the Hashi Exchange. We had a lot of students participate in that. We did have a lot of students, families that ended up coming to the Hashi Exchange program a couple weeks ago. And there's just some more photos of our exchange. This is our primary exchange with Amori in Japan now. We used to do some things at the middle school. This is really kind of morphed after or during the pandemic into this cultural exchange of artwork, where we are, it's a great connection with the students in Amori and our students here in our district. And there's just photos of students and families celebrating that cultural exchange. I think it's very exciting to be able to do this every year. So again, thank you to Linda McCann Olson and all those folks that helped make this a huge success. So that's the report.
Great. Thank you.
Can I just add, I think it was also really wonderful to see the Hashi Exchange on display at the Cumberland County Fair in the exhibition hall.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Ann.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, I'm really excited to move into committee reports because I know there's been a lot going on in committees. So we're going to lead out with student reports.
Okay, I'll start. First off, the girls field hockey team had a really big win against Lake Region on Friday. That was very exciting. I know there were a lot of people who were excited about that. Also, in general, I think this year, the junior class especially, there's been so much excitement and build up for a lot of sports events. There's a lot of positive energy. So many people are showing up to the sports games, and it's really, it's been really fun to see. Other thing Mr. Porter talked about was we had the talk with Lawrence Alexander. That was really valuable, I think, and it's really nice to be able to have a full school assembly where it's a time where the whole school can come together, and that really doesn't happen a lot. Also, he's super charismatic, so he gets everyone to laugh, and it's really nice because you can look around and everyone's smiling and they're all at the same time talking and thinking about things that are pretty meaningful. I think some of my main takeaways from that were the words you say matter, which is obviously true, but it just kind of reinforces that. The other thing is that the choices you make every day is what defines you, and it's if you mess up one day, it's okay. It's just that the repetitive choices that you make is kind of what makes up who you are. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that Sophia said. It was very enlightening and interesting to hear. one thing that we talked about in our English class was how he really drove home the point, and I can still remember him saying, "You are what you habitually do." That was one thing that stuck with me. But in terms of the past week and the upcoming weeks, it is a very busy time at the high school. Last week, we had the post-secondary fair, which I think around 50 colleges came to the high school, and also other post-secondary options, which students at the high school went and talked with admissions officers, military recruiters, all different kind of pathways for post-secondary life. And also the senior sunrise was last Friday, which was a super good senior bonding event. I had a lot of fun, and I know a lot of my peers had a lot of fun as well, which was super nice and put on by some senior parents and Miss Dexter, which was a great celebratory opportunity to just kind of mark the beginning of senior year. And next week is the very, very busy week with homecoming week, where the homecoming dance will be on Saturday with many theme days with different theme ideas like Pink Out, America Day or Patriotic Day, Greeley Gear. We've got a lot of ideas, a lot of ways to celebrate, and in the midst of homecoming week, we also have a day where all of the different grades will be doing different activities. The juniors will be taking the PSAT. The freshmen will be doing Camp Kiev, bonding and community building events. The sophomores will be going on college tours to Bowdoin, Colby, Bates, and I believe USM, and they have a choice to which one they would like to go to. And at the end of this whole week, on Friday, the French exchange students are coming from France. So it's a very, very big and busy week. And for the seniors, the English department is providing all of the English teachers are giving out their time on that Wednesday to read all of the college essays that people can bring in and just kind of workshop and do everything around that, which is really nice. And I'm very excited to utilize that. And yeah, it's a very, very busy time, and I'm very excited for the homecoming week.
Thanks, Tommy. And I'm glad we have a little gap between this and our next board meeting. It sounds like you needed some
exactly. Given that I wasn't going to be doing another one of these for about 3 weeks, I was like, gotta pack it in.
Thank you. Great. Community Engagement Committee?
We had our first meeting last week, and it was, I think, incredibly productive. Lots of big brains sitting at the tables, and Nina and Madge are our two community volunteers who seem extremely professional and extremely adept at what they do, and I think will add a lot. There are still a lot of ideas floating around, so I won't give a ton of concrete detail just because I think there are still some things yet to come which are very exciting. But first meeting down, we meet again next week, and we'll probably be coming back after that meeting with a little bit more detail about sort of where we're going and how we expect to get there, because there are a couple interesting ideas, one of Tommy's in fact. So I'll wait to reveal more.
Can't wait. Great.
Sorry, I had one thing that I forgot to add to my student report. The fall/winter play has begun and the cast list has been set. The drama group is doing Alice in Wonderland, and that will occur at sometime in December. I don't know the exact date, but I think
first weekend.
Yeah, it's already been set, so mark your calendars. It's going to be a great production.
Maybe we can have them come do a little preview at one of the school board meetings before.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thanks. All right, finance?
I have no updates for finance or curriculum. But Tommy, you can have my time if you want.
Great. Policy?
We met to discuss the graduation policy and are pretty well through any proposed draft edits on that, which is always a good start. One thing I did want to share, I think maybe a couple years ago, the last time I was policy chair at a board meeting, I had shared sort of the process for policy review, and I did share that with all of our incoming board members this year too, but just to be able to share it with the public. So policies are reviewed for updates when there are statutory changes, current policy is not in alignment with what is needed by the district, and has been asked to be reviewed by either administration, MEA, or students, or if current policy is in need of routine review to ensure that it remains accurate and effective. The policy committee invites relevant stakeholders to draft language for proposed changes and participate in discussion at committee meetings. Once a proposed draft has been approved by voting members of the committee, it is sent to Drummond-Woodsum for review to ensure that proposed language meets all legal requirements. If it is approved by our council at Drummond, the policy will be sent to the full board of directors for a first read during a regular business meeting. If the board does not raise additional questions or concerns, it will be added as a second read and voted on to be adopted or rejected at the following regular business meeting. If the board raises any issues, it will be sent back to policy for additional work, which would then also be reviewed by Drummond-Woodsum before returning to the board for a new first read. The same is true if the policy made it to a second read and was not voted to be adopted by the board. It is possible to present a policy for first and second read at the same meeting. However, this practice has generally not been used by the policy committee. The policy committee is also responsible for deleting any policies which are no longer needed or are addressed in other district policies. To delete a policy, it also goes through a first and second read in general. Again, deletion can also be presented for a first and second read simultaneously, although as a practice, we've discussed following a consistent procedure to allow board members for adequate time to consider any potential concerns deleting a policy. Routinely, the district also compares policies with our surrounding districts to ensure that we are in general alignment with others in our area, and new policies to be adopted are generally built on draft language that has been already written by Drummond-Woodsum or the MSBA, which then follows the procedure outlined as I just outlined. And lastly, policy language is generally written in the broadest manner to allow flexibility needed to best serve students and staff. Some policies will have a corresponding R document outlining procedures, but as a matter of practice, the district has reduced the number of R policies. And as a result, we're also able to implement administrative procedures for policies to be used internally, which are not required to be approved by the board.
Great. Thank you. And that was also the document we talked about adding to maybe a board packet in the future, or a board
Yep.
manual. Yeah, it was really helpful.
We had talked about having a board handbook or something, a guide, and I did take Ann's language and I've dropped that in, and hopefully in the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we can share that out with the board, a draft of the handbook. And it does have, I think this is really important information to have. All of this we got to have in one place because we kind of assume that people know stuff. And so when I saw Ann's stuff on blurb on the policies, I thought that was a really important place to begin and just start developing a guide that we can have for the board.
Great.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also wondered if it maybe could be added to the website too under the board,
That could
just
be.
for public reference too.
Find that very
Great.
helpful. Yeah.
Oh, and our next meeting is Tuesday, October 24th.
Great. Thank you. Christina, facilities?
Our first meeting is Friday, and we are set to review the long-term and short-term goals with the aid of Scott's ever-present slideshows. And we also will go over the capital plan so we can continue to maintain all the facilities we currently have. And then we'll be setting priorities, which some of the board members have shared what they'd like to see, and one detail is a tour for the board members to be offered of all the current facilities we'll be talking about that as well.
Yeah, great, thank you. Curriculum, Tom mentioned, and then equity.
So similar to the Community Engagement Committee, we had our first meeting last week, which I thought was had some really robust conversation. Just becoming a team is, important, especially when something as passionate as equity. So I thought we had some really good time, even just discussing perhaps updated definitions of equity or different lenses. DEI work has changed significantly over just even the last couple of years. So just kind of as a group exploring what it is that we're doing this year. So it was a great meeting. We talked about some goals for the year. I'm not going to share those only because they were kind of the goals that I put out there, and we have not as a committee decided that those are the goals, but obviously the big one is the equity plan. It is our goal to present that to the board at the November 20th meeting so that it can be done by Thanksgiving, which means we have a bit of work to do. But for starters, it's coordinating the feedback that we received. That deadline has now passed to go through the website. So if you go to the website, there's no longer that option of emailing through the website what your thoughts are on the plan. However, our next meeting is next week. So anyone can email myself or Tim, and just, it's not too late. So please feel free to look at that plan. And really the big job is just sort of compiling all the feedback into different categories, and so that we can kind of look at that. I think our biggest challenge based on the feedback is finding that balance between being an advisory committee, an accountability partner committee with the administration, or are we an authority on equity? And so figuring out what our role is, and whether the plan meets that expectation. Tim, do you have anything to add?
It was great to have Anne there, and like the chair of Ghosts Past were there to kind of give us the context of where everyone's been, and it was good team building and a lot of passion, and it's exciting to see what we can do this year. And the feedback has continued to come in kind of at a slow rate, which I find somewhat encouraging, at the same time discouraging. But I've been thankful for it, and it's been productive, and I thought last meeting was very productive and energetic, and I left looking forward to what we had to come this year.
Thank you. So finally, were there any ad hoc committee reports today?
Can we just highlight what's happening at the GCA tomorrow?
Oh, yes.
Jeff, would you comment
yes.
on that?
The Supreme Court, Maine Supreme Court, will be at the GCA tomorrow, and they'll be there for the entire morning. And we have social studies classes that will be rotating in and out. They have different times where you have to stay there, because they're arguing cases or listening to cases being argued. And then there's some breaks in between, but we have a schedule where we have students that will be coming in and out with their social studies classes tomorrow. And Representative Moriarty will be the attorney of the day. I guess they have an attorney of the day, but it's very exciting to host the Maine Supreme Court here in the GCA. A lot of prep work was done in advance just to make sure that the venue worked for the justices. But I think it's, and these were actual cases. I think they're not arguing. The attorneys are arguing 3 different cases in front of the justices that are law cases. The Supreme Court deals with law cases, but I know a couple of board members were able to make it into their schedule to come. We've got a couple of town councilors coming and select board members, I think, coming, and other folks. But it should be a good event.
Great. Thank you. And then I know there's a PTO event coming up. Annika, do you want to share?
There is, yeah. I know, other than what was mentioned this evening already, so the grand event coming up at MIW on October 18th, but this Wednesday is the event with Jennifer Wiesner on raising sexually healthy children, co-sponsored by PTO and Foundation 51 in this room Wednesday evening, 6 p.m., I believe.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So I think we made it through committee reports. The next item is communications. As you see, there's nothing listed. I think we covered a lot of it, and I'm also watching the clock a little bit. That is a few minutes fast. It's actually 8:56. And so, yeah, you can see it up there too. But I think I again just want to express my appreciation. I know it's a lot to get all of this committee work up and going, and although we don't have another official board meeting until the end of the month with the joint meeting, that there's a lot of committee work going on in the meantime. So thank you for that, and I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Leah, can I just mention one thing? This is, we have sent a communication out this evening, but I got a lot of questions. We've gotten a lot of questions this weekend about the pandemic EBT cards that went out, and just to let parents know, and that communication did go out a couple hours ago now. But those cards were sent out to 80% of all of Maine's students, and that's because the state opted for free and reduced meals for all students, and districts could opt in or out. 80% of the districts, including ours, opted in, so that we now provide free meals to our students. But as a result, the state issued all these EBT cards, is what they call them, pandemic cards, for any student who's in a district that opted in. So all of the families in this district should have received, or every student should have received a card. You do not have to use it. Our communication just says that if you want to destroy the card, you don't have to use it. But we've gotten a lot of questions, so we wanted to just make sure that we put it out verbally, it went out in writing. Just, you can use them if you want, or you can not use them. It's totally up to you, but it is part of the state free and reduced lunch to all students for districts that opt in, and we are a district that opted in, and that's why you received the cards. We didn't get prior notification from the state, so we would have sent out a message, but we didn't receive any. We had to look into it, and so hopefully that's enough information for
And
everyone.
each card has the same amount, and
I believe that each card is the same. It's like $8 for every. It goes back to the pandemic, and it recalculates something, but it's $8.18 per something.
Per student, per day.
For each student per day that something was going on with the pandemic. Honestly, we don't have a lot of detail, but that's all I can tell you is that the money is there. If you want to use it, that's fine. If you don't use it, it goes back into the state SNAP program, which is for free and reduced incomes families.
It was confusing. Nobody applied.
Right, right.
So they were getting cards.
So I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but so if everybody went out and used it, like went to Hannaford and like bought the full balance, would that deplete the SNAP funds for the people who actually need it?
I believe it would, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
I know that has an impact on the SNAP fund. I don't think it would deplete all of it, obviously, but that money just goes back into the SNAP fund is the way it was explained to me. And we had to check in with our county superintendent's group to find out what was going on. People were hearing things, but yes, that's my understanding is that if you don't use it, it goes back into the SNAP fund.
But knowing how government programs work, I would guess that it would be a separate fund from people who are accessing regular SNAP benefits, and that it would just renew maybe with the future. But I think those are really great details that a lot of people will be interested in knowing, because I know people were considering donating, getting food and donating. So maybe
that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we get more information, we'll certainly put it in this week's newsletter. I probably won't have that information until Thursday, and I was just going to check really quick to see if I got, while you're adjourning, I might have more information.
Okay, yeah. I mean, not many people are probably watching to the very end of this anyway. I mean, can I get a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Who was so moved?
Second.
And then Christina. All in favor of adjourning? Unanimous? All right.